Good evening. This is the July 11th, 2023 meeting of the St. Mary's County Board of Appeals, located in the Commissioners of St. Mary's County Meeting Room of the Chesapeake Building, 41770 Baldridge Street, Leonardtown, Maryland. I am Chairman Dan Ikniowski, and with 4 other board members, we have met our minimum requirement for a quorum. Therefore, we will proceed with the meeting this evening. Residents may view the meeting on Channel 95 and YouTube. All case documents may be viewed on the County Board Docs site. I will open the meeting up for public testimony after all of the presentations and testimony by the applicant and representatives have been completed. However, the estimated time for those presentations will likely exceed the meeting. We anticipate this case will be continued to allow each party to fully present their case and do not believe there will be time for public comment this evening. And again, that could change. Public comment will be permitted in this case prior to the case returning to the board for any closing comments, members' discussion, and decision. And now I'd like to ask the board members to introduce themselves, beginning on my right.
Wayne Medinsky.
Good evening, Lynn Delahaye.
And again, I'm Dan Ikniowski.
Good evening, Rich Richardson.
Good evening, Guy Bradley.
And our attorney. And then also in the audience is Mr. Ronald Payne, and he is the alternate member of the Board of Appeals. Supporting staff in the audience tonight and are John Hauser, the Assistant County Attorney, Jessica Andrus. Good evening, welcome. Our new Director of the Department of Land Use and Growth Management, Courtney Jenkins, the Deputy Director, Stacy Clements, Planner 3 with Land Use and Growth Management, Amber Thompson, Permits Manager for Land Use and Growth Management, Jim Gotch, the Director of Public Works. Did I miss anybody? Very good. In the media control room is Amy Carter, the video media producer. And in the John Savage conference room in the back of the building is Sherry Young, Board of Appeals recording secretary. Tonight we have a bit of a change. Mr. Cherry had a terrible occurrence in life over the weekend. His mother passed away. So we would like to offer him our condolences and deepest sympathy. And hopefully him and his family will do well during this period. So representing tonight, the applicant and respondent will be Peter Hershey. And he will be representing Charles William Mattingly Jr., Blue Grist LLC, 7 Point Agro Therapeutics, this 2 LLC. The appellant's counsel tonight will be Mr. Nelson.
It's Alex Vota. Hi, yes, I'm Alex Vota. I'm an associate with Mr. Nelson, and I'll be representing the citizens, or the appellants tonight.
Alice.
Alex, like the boy's name, but unisex, I guess.
Okay, Alex. We'll call you Alex. And the parties that she'll be representing are Anthony Dameron, James Morris, Robert Allen Russell Jr., Kathy Owens, Sergio Torres, Rose Ellen Guither, Kimberly Gibson, Robert T. Brown Jr., and Victoria Brown, Nolan Smith and Rachel Hostetter, Christina and Christopher Farr, and Natasha and Russell Jones. We have one item on the agenda tonight for a public hearing, and this is the 7 Point Agro Cultivation Center Appeal, ZAAP 18-01405. Again, the order of presentation this evening, I will briefly go over the anticipated order for the proceedings tonight. However, the board has the discretion to revise the order of the proceedings, ask questions, review issues, and/or to hear such testimony, evidence, and statements as the board shall determine, and the board has the right to close proceedings due to time constraints if the proceedings run late. The first night of the meeting will be tonight, and its anticipated order of process will be as follows. The county staff report will be given by Mr. John Hauser. Appellant's opening statement will be given by Alex. The respondent's opening statement may also be given, and after the appellant's opening statement, they will also present the case and put that together. And then we will close the public hearing for the evening, depending upon the time. The second night, we will pick it up again with the staff, reiterating what we had covered the night before, the respondent's case, the appellant's rebuttal statement, and then we will have citizens' testimony and statements, and we will close the public hearing at that time, and the board will have time for deliberation and, if applicable, a decision. And again, that will be on the night of October 26, 2023. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Hauser for the staff introductions.
Board members, good evening. Once again, for the record, my name is John Hauser, Assistant County Attorney, preparing a condensed staff report for tonight's proceedings as an introduction to this hearing. As Mr. Chairman just noted, breaking this up and doing it a little bit differently than the board members are used to seeing in the regular course of matters, owing to the great volume of evidence and testimony we expect in this case and the complexity of the matters it concerns. Tonight is going to consist of the quick run-through of the staff report, which will be an introduction to the matter and what I hope would be basic undisputed facts, followed by opening statements from the appellants, citizens who are alleging that the Director of Land Use and Growth Management erred in a determination our prior director made regarding this facility, followed by the neighbors' presentation of their evidence and testimony they are going to offer in support of their claims. That will be followed by opening statements from the property owner. That is what we're anticipating to get through tonight. Remainder of the procedure, as Mr. Chairman just said, the next available date wherein this room and all attorneys involved are available is not until October 26th. I do promise you we tried to find something before that, and that is just how it broke down this time. That evening, it's planned to go into introduction of the property owners, witnesses, evidence, and testimony that they will offer, followed by public hearing from any members of the public that have not testified as part of the proceedings of either party's case in chief, followed by closing remarks, and then ultimately a deliberation and decision by the Board of Appeals. The staff report is much unchanged from the one delivered on May 25th at the motions hearing that was heard on this matter. Basic issue or summary of the issue we have here tonight is that the property is address 21416 Able Road in Avenue, Maryland. It consists of 26.38 acres more or less, fronts Able Road and Gerardsco Road, and the first permit application for a medical cannabis growing facility was submitted by prior property owners on July 11th, 2018. At the time that application was made, there were no specific use types, no specific standards or regulations for cannabis facilities in the St. Mary's County Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance. Lugum staff at the time determined that the most substantially similar use type to supply the regulations and the standards which would govern that permit application was use type 5, crop production and horticulture. From July 11th, 2018 and then on, the applicant submitted numerous site plans and modifications, but finally on October 27th, 2021, Land Use and Growth Management approved the 7 Points Agricultural Building permit plans for permit 18-1405. Site plan depicted an existing research facility that had been previously built pursuant to permit 19-0535, and a grow house and 2 greenhouses to accompanying it. A building permit for the grow house and only the grow house was issued on November 18th, 2021. On August 23rd, 2022, the Commissioner of St. Mary's County adopted Ordinance 2022-30, adopting specific use types for medical cannabis cultivation, processing, and dispensary facilities. Most relevant and salient feature of that ordinance for the purposes of tonight is that it had the immediate consequence of making the existing, or at that time under construction, a grow house a non-conforming use. Under the new ordinance that was adopted, this parcel is located in the Rural Preservation District, and such facilities as this grow house going forward under this ordinance are not allowed in, among other zones, the Rural Preservation District. St. Mary's County's comprehensive zoning ordinance, as well as the common law and state law, does recognize and accept the standard of vested rights as established by Maryland common law, a phrase you will be hearing much of during the legal proceedings I expect to come. On September 13th, 2022, St. Mary's County Health Department approved a second sand mound septic system for the grow house. On October 11th, 2022, Land Use and Growth Management approved amendment of the applicant's prior site plan to show the approved second sand mound septic system. That was the only modification to the approved site plan that was on file. A letter from Director Bill Hunt was issued to neighboring landowners and those who wish to be apprised of ongoing development and permitting at that facility on October 17th, 2022, giving notice of the allowance of that modification of the site plan on file and a brief explanation of some of its surrounding context. Appellants filed their appeal on November 9th, 2022, alleging that accepting that modification of the on-file site plan was an illegal act, that it was a mistake by the land use director. On December 19th, 2022, Land Use and Growth Management issued another letter in place of the October 17th, 22 letter to explain with much greater particularity and to clear up some confusion and correct some mistaken phrases that were used in that October 17th letter, and disseminated that to the neighbors. Both of those letters, the original October 17th letter and the subsequent December 19th, 2022 letter, are part of the staff report included as attachments. Following certification pursuant to Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance Section 23.2 that any further stay would represent an imminent peril to property, Land Use and Growth Management issued a use and occupancy certificate to the grow house on April 13th, 2023, upon successful completion of its final inspections. A simultaneously and after-the-fact permit for an existing perimeter fence was issued. Those two acts have also been appealed, but they are not the subject of the appeal before the Board of Appeals tonight. Both of those issues have, with the consent of all the parties involved, the county, the appellants, and the property owner, we've asked that those matters be held in abeyance pending the outcome of this hearing. So unless they are rendered moot, those will be heard on another date, but again will be held in abeyance until the time is ripe and this matter is dispensed with. I believe through consent of the property owner and the appellants that they have filed stipulations with the Board of Appeals acknowledging that the only issue the appellants are moving forward to on tonight are the claim that that allowance of the amendment to the site plan to allow that second sand mound septic system this fall was an improper act by the Department of Land Use and Growth Management, more specifically that Land Use and Growth Management should have determined that it was an illegal and unlawful expansion of a non-conforming use, that it should have been denied for that reason. That sums up the staff report as I would present it. If there are any questions, I'm happy to field them to the best of my ability.
Do the board members have any questions?
No, sir.
No, sir. Thank you very much. You'll be available to answer other questions later.
You know where to find me.
Thank you. Front row. Next, we will turn it over to the appellants and Alex. And then we're also going to have Mr. Hershey sit up at the front desk with you also. Your last name again, Alex?
It's Votaw. V like Virginia, O, T like Tom, A-W.
Okay. Thank you.
And if I may, Chairman, I have two preliminary matters. One, when you listed the appellants, you listed Kathy Owens, and I just want to clarify that we dismissed her appeal. Everyone else, of course, is still appealing it, but Kathy Owens is not part of this appeal anymore. So I just want to make sure that's clear for the record. The second is for the exhibits I have for tonight, both PowerPoints and physical documents. I've printed out copies. I just wanted to ask if you all wanted the physical copies or if you would prefer to look at it on your computer, which would be your preferences.
Will it show up on the screens here or on the computer?
Yes, I can have them show up on the screens if you'd like.
Yeah.
On these screens here? Okay, that's
Yeah,
fine.
there are a couple documents that I have essentially blown up in a PowerPoint form, so they're easier to read. So I'm not going to plan to project the actual document. I'll submit it into the record, or I actually already have, but the PowerPoint will have a blown-up version of what I'm focusing on. So, but I also have a printed version of the actual document itself. If you would like that, I'm happy to hand that out.
Anybody want a printed version? One,
You like one? Okay, great.
and I'll have one too.
Okay, great. Would you want me to?
Great.
Okay, great. I also like the paper too. Would you prefer I hand those all out right now or as I go? I'm happy to do
Why don't
whatever
you hand
works.
them out now?
Okay, great.
And then you don't have to be up and down.
Okay, great. You said 3, right?
One, two, three.
Peter, would you like a copy now?
I have a copy.
Okay, great. Steve, would you like a copy now? And John, would you like a copy? I'm gonna make, if you give me a second, I'll make the packets for everyone. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you for bearing with me on that. Should I go ahead and start with the opening statement? All right. So good evening, members of the board. As I said, I'm Alex Votoff from the Law Office of G. Macy Nelson, and today I'm representing a group of citizens, many of whom are here tonight with me, who oppose the applicant's attempt to expand its nonconforming use on the property. If staff could please pull up, one moment, attachment 9. And this is, should be the first packet I gave to you all. Yes, I just want to orient ourselves as to the property that we're talking about today, so we really understand what's going on here. Is this the clicker?
That won't work for the PDFs, just for the
No worries.
PowerPoints.
All right, so you can see the subject property in this image on the bottom left-hand corner in the red dot. And again, just to orient ourselves, that's southwest of where we are tonight in Leonardtown. If you go to the next slide for me. The subject property you can see more clearly here. I've outlined it in red. This is an aerial image from 2017, and it shows that this property historically has been used as a rural agricultural property where they grow crops and harvest them seasonally. If you could go to the next slide, that'd be great.
Gotcha.
Thank you. So as John, I think, very succinctly explained, the property owner or applicant here began the process of trying to develop this property with what is now an industrial level warehouse. Starting in around 2018, I believe John said, that's when they started applying for the applications, and that went through to 2021 when they were approved for a building permit for the warehouse. So this image here shows you kind of a progression of change on the property. This is from 2020. And then if you go to the next image, this is what the property looks like now. You can see in the background the white building, that's the warehouse that we're talking about tonight. You can see kind of in the foreground of the image is that field that in the 2020 image kind of started to look like it was different, didn't have crops on it, it was more dirt. And then you can see at the bottom of this image, that's Canoe Neck Creek. And then if you go to the next slide. So this is what it looks like today. This was taken by one of my clients, I think, with a drone maybe a couple days ago, maybe a few weeks ago. Again, just a better image of the warehouse that we're talking about tonight and the property where it's at overall. So as I said, I'm representing a group of citizens some of whom live close to this property, some of whom live farther away, but they all share a common goal of trying to commit and care, or protect and care about their community. This is not a vendetta against the cannabis warehouse. It's not a petty property dispute. It's genuine concern by community members about the health of their families, of their neighbors, and their environment. So before we get into the substance and the meat of my presentation, I thought it might be helpful to show a couple of videos that give you, again, a better understanding of the neighborhood we're talking about tonight.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to object to the extent that we're going to present evidence, and I would like to address this up front, and I really hate objecting to your opening argument, but I want to address this up front because this is an appeal, and this has a particular posture as an appeal. And because it's an appeal, the only issues in front of the board are those that are specifically appealed. And if I direct the board's attention to the case, the Board v. Southern Resources Management, it's 154 Maryland Ave. 10, which was the Court of Special Appeals, is now the appellate court. And that court explained that only those matters appealed are heard and decided, and not every matter that was involved in the underlying application is addressed as part of an appeal. It's only those specific issues. And here we have a very, very narrow issue, which it just deals with Protestants' nonconforming use argument. It doesn't deal with the grow house generally. It doesn't deal with the prior building permits for the grow house, which were approved back in 2021 and they weren't appealed. And it doesn't deal with things such as the creek. It doesn't deal with other aspects of the property. This is a very narrow issue, and some of these videos are going to show things that are just not relevant to the case, in which if they were admitted into evidence, we would object for relevancy grounds and because they're outside the scope of that very narrow issue. So I wanted to put that on the record and draw that to the board's attention. Thank you.
If I may address this, or Steve, did you want to say anything?
No, go ahead, Alex.
I would just say that generally, tribunals or community, local level bodies like the Board of Appeals, as I'm sure you already know, have a much more relaxed rules of evidence than in a court level. So anything that you as a body deem relevant to your considerations, you are permitted to consider in this hearing. We are allowed to submit to the record. We are offering you the images of the community so we can understand what it means to expand this use, what impacts it will have on the community. That's at the issue here, is whether or not it's an expansion of a nonconforming use. And if I may, the applicants in their memorandum claim that because this is an indoor use, it's not going to impact the community at all, so it shouldn't be considered. And so, we think it's really important to really understand on the ground what is going on and what this property looks like. And the videos, if I may just describe them briefly, they're just a drive-through of the neighborhood of the houses that my clients are going to talk about that they live in, just to give you a visual key of what we're talking about. We're not arguing over permits that were approved in 2021. That's not the point of these exhibits. It's simply just to give you an idea of the community that we're discussing tonight.
As a part of the submissions, you have also submitted a possible reconsideration because of lack of standing of the people that are on the list here. I think it would be beneficial for the board to see the video to get a sense of the neighborhood and what that may or may not entail.
Understood, Mr. Chairman. One of my concerns with the video is, just so I can put it on the record and I understand your position, is that just showing videos with no context, no date, this board still has some rules of evidence. They may be more relaxed than, say, a court proceeding. I understand that. But we still need some kind of authentication and some kind of context. I'd just like to put that on the record. Thank you.
Okay?
So, Mr. Chair, if I might interject, the applicable board rule is 5-104A. The chair may admit evidence which possesses probative value commonly accepted by reasonable and prudent persons in the conduct of their affairs. Mr. Chair, it's up to you to determine whether or not an objection is sustained or overruled. And then if evidence is admitted, obviously it's up to the board to determine
Its value.
what weight they want to give to that evidence.
And I would overturn the objection so that you may go forward with your presentation.
Okay, thank you. So if, Stacy, if you don't mind going to attachment 13. if you could keep it on mute and if you could pause it for a moment. I really would just like to play minutes 2:42, roughly around there. Yeah, that's great. And this was taken by one of my clients, Kimmy Gibson, who again will be talking tonight. And this is just a view of, I believe it's Gerard's Cove Road, leading up to her property. So to the right, if I remember correctly, that veers off, it's Gerard's Cove Road, goes towards the water, and she's driving up towards her house. This just gives you a feel for the community. And again, I will show you how close each of the people testifying are to the properties that we're talking about. But it's a rural community, it's a quiet community, people enjoy the outdoors. They come to that community for peace and quiet and relaxation.
Counsel, just to give us a little bit more foundation, do you know who took this and what date it was taken?
Yes, Kimmy Gibson, she's in the audience. She took it, I believe it was 2 days ago? Yeah,
Okay, so that would be July 9th?
yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's good for now. Thank you. And then one more, again, just to give you an idea about how this is a largely waterfront community as well. If you could please play attachment 15. Thank you. We're just going to play this for a few moments. So this was taken by another woman who will be testifying today. Her name is Rose. It says on there when it was uploaded, I believe it was roughly February of 2022. I don't know the exact date, but again, just really demonstrating this is a waterfront community. It's a community that really prioritizes being outside, being involved with the environment, and taking care of their community members. That's good for now. Thank you so much. So with that in mind, I would like to turn to talking about who some of my citizens are, or who some of my clients are. As I mentioned, some live further away, but many live close by to this property. So if, Stacy again, I'm sorry to keep asking you to do so many things. If you could please put up attachment 10.
Okay, nearby appellants? Give me a moment. I'll load the PowerPoint.
Okay. Is it clicker where it goes on? Okay. So, as the chairman mentioned, there is an issue of standing and how close my clients are to this property. So this image shows all of my clients who live roughly within 1,000 feet of the subject property. And I'm going to go through each one to show how close they are. Hopefully, there we go. So one of my clients is Anthony Damron. He lives in the house that's highlighted in green. I believe the property is owned by his mother, and actually the property directly adjacent to it, to the left, in between the subject property and the place where he lives, is owned by his father. The Howard County GIS map has a really cool feature where you can measure distances. So according to not Howard County, I apologize, the St. Mary's County GIS map. So according to the St. Mary's County GIS map, Anthony Damron's property is roughly 220 feet away from the subject property. And this area of the subject property is the portion of the property where the proposed septic system is going to be installed.
Property line from property line, property line to property line.
Yes, correct. And that is historically the test under the law. The next one we have is Sergio Torres, is another one of our clients, and he lives again in the green outlined property, subject property consistently in the red. The GIS map says he's roughly 775 feet away from the subject property. Ruth and James Morris will be testifying tonight. Their house is again highlighted in the green, and they live approximately 442 feet away from the edge. It's kind of a pipe stem of the property. The GIS map doesn't have an updated picture for a satellite with the warehouse on it, so I didn't want to project that, but I used the measuring tool to roughly measure approximately where the warehouse would be, and it's no more than 600 feet. I think it's in the 500s, but It's pretty close to the 442 that we have here. Next, we have Rose Ellen Geither. I apologize if I butchered your last name. She lives about 971 feet away from the subject property. She's to the north. And then we have Robert Russell. He lives roughly 643 feet away from the subject property. So all of these citizens live in close proximity to the property. There are a couple other citizens who are my clients who live on that same peninsula. They just weren't within the 1,000 feet, so I kept it with those 5. All right, thank you for that. So now I would like to go into a brief overview of what was approved and what we're disputing here about what was a non-conforming use. So again, Stacy, if you could please pull up attachment 11, that would be great, thank you.
Approvals.
Yeah.
There we go.
Thank you. So John already gave a really good overview of what was approved. I thought I would add some visuals so we can really get an idea. So again, in 2021, they were approved for a building permit for the cultivation building, which is the warehouse we're talking about tonight, with roughly 52,580 square feet. One of the exhibits I provided to you, which is this one, and it's also, I believe, I don't have it written down which attachment it is, but
Give me a
I
second.
apologize. Do you need me to identify that?
I'm looking to see if I can. Signed permit for 11/18/2021?
Yes,
Okay, that is attachment 7.
thank you. So that's attachment 7. I didn't include it in the blow-up that I have here, but in this section of the plan, when it describes the property we're talking about, it says per plan, which means, my interpretation, per the site plan. And so I've also submitted that into evidence and handed that out to a few of you, the site plan, which I've blown up here from 2021. And I'm not trying to dispute who approved the actual ability to construct the septic permit. What we're focusing on is what does this plan conceptualize in 2021, and then how does that change after the enactment of the zoning text amendment? So this building site plan, which is, do you need me to identify which exhibit it's in?
The building permit site plan?
Yeah, like which
See?
specific page?
I think we can note that all of these exhibits are on the St. Mary's County Board docs and within the record of the
Yes.
the Board of Appeals.
Okay, great.
So reference could be made to the number that has been assigned in the board docs.
Okay, great, thank you. So, I'm sorry, yeah. So this, as you can see in the red circle, identifies one septic system. And then if you were able to zoom in closer in person, oh, my clicker is not working.
Let's see. Do you need the next slide?
Yes, please, thank you.
There you go.
Okay, so this is just a zoomed-in version of what we just were looking at. And you can see at the top of this image, it says proposed 10,000 square feet of sewage reserve area. So again, this is what was approved or was contemplated in the site plan that was approved in 2021. And you go to the next slide. Thank you. On the bottom corner of that document, if you blew it up, you'd see this little block. I've added the highlights just to, again, highlight what we're focusing on. This gives further clarification of what the capacity of that septic system was proposed in 2021, which was 400 gallons per day to accommodate 25 employees. Notably here, you see in the grow house, again, which is the warehouse we're talking about, is only contemplated 22 employees. And then in the research and development building, which was already approved, is 3 employees. So that's what was contemplated in 2021 before the enactment of the zoning text amendment. I have a few documents which I submitted into the record, and I apologize, I did not write them down, but I have it on my phone. I just don't want to be rude and look at my phone.
Okay.
But the letter from 2022, We don't need to pull it up, but I handed this out, it's in the record. It's a letter that John sent me, actually, just again explaining that when the applicant began to explore expanding its nonconforming use, they had to submit an amended site plan that needed to be approved at multiple levels, including by the county, not just the health department, by the land use and growth management department. So that's the purpose of this letter that's already in evidence. And then I also have an email chain that I submitted into evidence as well, which again just nails down this point again, that the county looked at the site plan and considered whether or not it created an enlargement of nonconforming use, which John already testified to or explained in his staff report. I don't believe adding any new information to that, just providing additional documentary evidence of that. So now,
If I could interrupt, Mr. Chairman, we would just please note our objection to this email chain, which we feel like is only part of a larger conversation. We don't think it's appropriate to admit it into evidence. We don't think it is in evidence at the moment, but to the extent counsel wants to admit it, we would just object. Please note our objection.
Noted. I'd like you to consider. Keep on going.
okay, thank you. So now, with that in mind about what the process was generally after the enactment of the zoning text amendment, I'd like to move to the next slide, if you will, Stacy. Thank you.
Get the right one. Give me just a bit. Okay, that's, there we go. Jeez. Give me. Give me one moment. We're having a little technical difficulty. Okay.
That was attachment 11, if that's helpful. I didn't know if you already had that pulled up. Okay, great, perfect. So with the amended site plan that was submitted after the enactment of the zoning text amendment, this now depicts two septic systems. Before we had one that I circled in red, now we have two. If you go to the next slide for me, I want to show you a few more details about the new septic system that was proposed in this amended site plan, or depicted or contemplated. We can see in the bottom left-hand corner of this image the existing sand mound system that was approved with that 2021 permit, or was contemplated with the 2021 permit. Again, that had 10,000 square feet of sewage reserve area. The new system is going to add 17,700 square feet of sewage reserve area for a total of 27,700 square feet on the property. And then if you go to the next slide, again, just a few more details about what this new septic proposal included. As we saw in the last one, the septic capacity and therefore the building capacity accommodated 25 employees. With the addition of the new septic system, we would now be able to process an additional 750 gallons per day for a total of 1,150 gallons per day. And then if you go to the next slide, servicing a total of 76 employees according to this. So this is the change that we are asserting is an improper expansion of a non-conforming use. So with that, that's kind of what was approved, and now I'd like to move into the citizen testimony, if that's all right, so that they can explain how this all has impacted them, how an expansion of this use will impact them, what they've observed on the ground.
Any questions from the board members?
No, sir.
The only one is the rate of expansion. What percentage was that?
We were planning to get into this more during our argument in the next hearing, but I'm happy to give you an overview. I just don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head. It depends on how you measure it. So if you go with the employees, it's well over 50%. The cutoff, I believe, is 25%. If you're going to expand a nonconforming use by 25%, it requires explicit approval by the Board of Appeals at a public hearing. If you're going to try to expand it more than 50%, you are not permitted to do that under the zoning ordinance. So if you measure by employees, we'll argue that that's more than 50%. If you measure by the number of the septic systems, that's more than 50%. If you measure by the capacity of the septic system, that's more than 50%. If you measure by the square footage of the sewage reserve area, that's well more than 50%. And even if you measure with the square foot of the building and the existing sewage reserve area, and then the addition of that second sewage reserve area, that's more than 25%, which would have, in our opinion, required Board of Appeals approval at the very least. And again, I'm not trying to argue that point at this time because we were told we'd argue it later, but that's generally our understanding of it.
Thank you.
Well, I still have the question that I had the
Yeah.
last time. The approved site plan from the earlier site plan showed the maximum flow of exactly 1,150 gallons per day. This seems to be something, the two septic systems that are just implementing what was approved on the original site plan.
Do you mind if I ask which site plan you were referring to?
The site plan that was submitted in 2018, 2022, 21, the first one.
First one? Well, I believe, again, I don't want to get too much into argument if we're reserving that for the next hearing, but to answer your question, my understanding is that an applicant can submit whatever they want, essentially, right? You can propose what you would like to have, but what was actually approved might be something different. So my understanding is that the 2021 approval for the specific building and the specific septic system that would service that building limited the capacity to 25 employees and 400 gallons per day. That's my understanding. I'm happy to provide more about that in the next hearing, though, so I can more specifically answer your question.
And that site plan said that the maximum flow from the facilities would be 1,150 gallons per day, plus a separate system of 450 gallons a day to serve the residents on the property. So that's what I think you need to address the next time.
Okay, I will definitely do that. Thank you for that question.
Do the other board members have any questions? No. Okay, carry on.
Okay. So if, Stacy, if you could please pull up attachment 12.
Okay.
And
There we go.
if it's all right with the board, I'm going to move over and have the citizens sit in the middle. Is that all right with you all? Okay.
Sure.
Okay. All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes, can I ask a question? As you're going to
course.
be bringing up the individuals in the appeal to give testimony at this time rather than at the public hearing portion?
Yes. I'm going to ask my clients and some residents specific questions that provide us factual information about the surrounding area, as well as giving them an opportunity to say something brief. I feel like that's more appropriate than the public testimony because it's not just giving their opinion about how they feel about the project overall. They're actually providing evidence about what they've observed, some pictures that they've taken, and how they use the area generally.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, as part of the case in chief, this is testimony that is being given on behalf of the appellant. So separate and apart, of course, from the public comment that we'll take at a later time.
So all of these speakers that we'll hear tonight will be your clients?
Most of them are my clients. A couple of them are property owners nearby the property.
Okay.
Yeah. So first, if I could have Kimmy come up.
Would you please remain standing and state your name and your address,
Yes.
and raise your right hand?
My name is Kimmy Gibson.
I'm sorry?
My name is Kimmy Gibson. I live at 38600 Pleasant Harbor Way.
Very good. Do you declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony, responses, and statements you may give will be the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please proceed.
All right, thank you, Kimmy. So before we begin, can you identify for me, is your property the property outlined in green on this map?
Yes, that's correct.
Great. And how long have you lived at this property?
I have lived at this property since about 2012. It's actually a property that's been in my family since 1959. It's actually the home that my grandparents built and that my dad grew up in. And my husband and I have lived there since about 2012.
Okay, great. And I'm going to go to the next slide, hopefully. There we go. So can you describe for me what this picture shows?
Yes, so in this picture, this is actually Pleasant Harbor Way, directly down the middle of the two fields here. My sister and my brother-in-law live in the single-story brick home to the right. I live in the two-story brick home to the far left. And in the middle is where my sister's father-in-law lives.
Great, thank you. And going back to what you were saying before about your father previously owning the property, did he consider renting out the property to anyone else while he owned it?
He did, actually. And if I could go back for just a minute, too, if you look to the far right of the image, that's actually where my parents live, and that's the home that I grew up in. So to answer your question, when my grandmother died, my father did some renovations to the home, and he considered actually renting it out. He actually had someone come and tour the residence, but decided that he couldn't have anyone else living there, that he wanted it to stay in the family, so.
Thank you. And who else lives at that property with you?
My husband and my 3 children, and we have a dog.
That's fun. And how do you and your family use your property in the area?
So actually, one of the greatest blessings for where we live is that actually my sister living in the single-story brick house, she has 3 children of her own, and we have 3 children. So we usually feel pretty safe to let them go back and forth between the 2 residences. We spend a lot of time at home. I'm actually a homeschooling mom. So we're home at our property about 90% of the time. I do work part-time job outside of the home, but the majority of the time that we have together, we're there, running back and forth between actually my parents' house to the far right and then our residence there.
And do you and your family, first, can you describe what this image is?
Yes, so this is actually the front side of our house, which is facing the water. My son loves to fish there off the bulkhead. We spend a lot of our evenings there, you know, when the weather's cool, especially. And my dad actually takes my son fishing a lot out on the boat, and we crab in the water there.
And is that Canoe Neck Creek? Then?
That is Canoe Neck Creek, yes.
And could you explain what this image is?
So this is actually the back of our residence. We have a garden that we planted there this year. There's a swing and sandbox for the kids. And then towards the back, past the tree there, you'll see the grow house.
Thank you. And then one more image. Can you explain what this one is?
So this is actually boathouse there at our residence. Also, this is Canoe Neck Creek here to the far right, and then panning across to the left is the garden with also the image of the grow house to the far left.
Thank you. And so you've mentioned that you have lived there, I think you said 16 years, and you actually grew up in a house a few doors down, and this used to be your grandmother's house. So is it fair to say that you've been in this area for a very long time?
That's correct, probably about 36 years.
Yeah. And so how would you describe how the subject property, the one we're talking about here with the grow house, how would you describe how that was used in the past?
It's always been a rural farm, fields as far as you can see. There was a barn that used to be on the property back when Senior Mr. Mattingly lived there. And you could actually see out to Able Road. You could see the traffic moving. My husband's a fireman, so anytime he would be responding to a call, I could actually see the other firemen responding from Able, from Collinwood, and other roads that are past farther south into Able.
Could you describe what this image is?
So this image I actually took when my son, let's see, he's probably about 8 years ago, 7 or 8 years ago. I actually cropped him out of the image. But this is the barn that I was speaking of, the fields. And then if you look in the distance where you see the power poles, the power lines, that's actually Able Road.
Okay, thank you. And so before the warehouse was constructed, were you given any notice that there was an application for it?
No, I was not.
How did you first find out about this proposal?
The first that I actually found out was when I saw that there was a fence. The fence had been up for quite some time. And then they actually started to pour the concrete slab for the building.
So that's when you first became aware that they were starting to build something on that site?
That's correct.
Okay, great. And then did you help advocate for the zoning text amendment that John explained earlier that changed where these types of uses, the warehouse uses, are allowed?
Yes, I did.
Why did you feel like it was important to advocate for that?
Because I felt that it was important to make sure that this didn't happen somewhere else in St. Mary's County.
Thank you. And so could you describe what this image shows?
So this image I actually took from about the same place in my driveway. The grow house you see, you can still see the tops of the power poles that are out to Able Road, and then of course the farm field that's just in front of it.
So would you say that the property where that warehouse is looks substantially different than it did in the past?
Very much so.
And how does this grow house and this new use on the property, how has that impacted your life and the life of your family?
I would like to just lodge a quick objection, which is this case is not a case about relitigating the grow house itself, whether that should have been permitted back in October or November 2021. It was permitted, that permit was not appealed, and the grow house has been already built. And so I want just to be very clear that this case is a very narrow issue, and we need to stick to that issue.
If I may, we are not challenging the grow house permit from 2021. We're simply providing evidence about how the possible expansion of operations on this site could impact the community.
Can we make observations at this point in time?
One more time? Sorry.
I make an observation at this point in time?
Can you?
Yes.
Yes, of course.
Okay, it looks to me is that when I look at the pictures where it's wide and it has a little bit of barn, the second picture is much narrower when you look at the tall tree, and then it shows the grow house. And if I think we were to superimpose both on each other, I don't think there was much difference.
I'm sorry, could you repeat yourself? I couldn't quite hear you.
If I look at the first picture with the barn,
Yeah.
I see a
Here,
tree.
I'll go back.
A tree on the right, middle right, and then the barn. Now, if I go to the next picture, I look and I see the tree on the right with the grow house butting up against it or close to it. And then to the left, I look and I see the notch in the tree line that matches, and it looks like the barn would be relatively close to the same size. I mean, am I mistaken there?
That might be true. The barn might be a similar size. I
Okay,
don't think we dispute that. Yeah, I think it's a different barn, different building, but
okay.
yes. Okay. Yeah, so if you could explain how this use has impacted you and your family and the community.
Sure. So one of my biggest concerns, being a mom of young children, is that there has been an increase in traffic, especially on our road. I can't say for sure if it's, employees that are there who are maybe unfamiliar with where they're going and they're coming to Gerards Cove Road versus going past our entrance to their employee entrance, or if it's people who are curious, but there has been an increase in traffic that has me concerned for the safety of my children. If you can't see it from here, but actually Gerards Cove Road circles all the way around, so once you get past where that field is, I would let them ride their bikes. I don't like them to do that anymore because there is traffic and there are people who drive fast who don't understand. I know that's not really the point of our argument today, but just it is a safety concern of mine because there is an increase in traffic. Currently, Able Road has been redone with recycled asphalt or something to that effect, and I don't think it's substantial to accommodate the amount of traffic that we are seeing there. There is an odor that permeates from the building, most especially in the evening or first thing in the morning, especially if there's a lot of humidity, density in the air. There is an odor. There are air handler units. You can't actually see them in this image here, but where you see the little bit of the peak that's kind of coming off of the building, there are air handler units on both sides of the building that are running at all times of the day. They're not all running at all times of the day, but they are running. And in the evening, they do tend to run more of them. So it is noisier in the evening when it would tend to be a quiet evening at home in the yard with the kids. It's now not. So I do have concerns about what's coming from the building, especially with there being an odor. There hasn't been any study done that I'm aware of to any harm that might be caused to me or my children. Also with the septic there, the potential for runoff or I'm not very well versed in that, but I do have concerns about how that could affect the water nearby. It's very close to the tributary that dumps directly into the creek that I live on, which is Canoe Neck Creek. I do have concerns about our well. I don't know how deep their wells are drilled, but I would imagine that something like this could require quite a bit of water for their plants, and that is concerning to me. I think that I completely understand that people in St. Mary's County have a right to do what they want on their property, but when their right and what they're trying to do on their property infringes on my right to enjoy my property, then I think we have a problem.
Thank you, Kimmy.
Mr. Chairman, for the record, please note my continuing objection as to the scope of the proceeding, and some of the claims that Ms. Gibson has talked about simply are not within the scope of what we're here to talk about tonight. Thank you.
Question, Mr. Hershey. Who now oversees the growth, sales, and production of marijuana in the state of Maryland?
I believe, are you asking about the agency?
Yes.
I believe it's called the Maryland Cannabis Commission.
Have you been to the Maryland Cannabis Commission to relay your concerns about the...
Yes, I have, sir. And when they came down, I actually submitted questions, and my questions were not addressed.
Thank you, Kimmy. I think that's all the questions I have. I think Peter might ask you a few questions.
Board members have any questions?
Yes, one question. Does your property have a well on it?
Yes, it does.
And how deep is the well?
To be honest, sir, I'm not sure.
You don't know?
I do not know.
Thank you.
Ms. Gibson, I'd like to ask you a couple quick questions.
Sure.
We've seen a couple photographs of your property. I believe your property is roughly 1,300 to 1,400 feet away from the Blue Grizz property. Does that sound correct?
I was told it was about 1,200, but to be honest, I do not know.
Okay, so you've never personally done a measurement.
I have not.
It looks like there's two farm fields and maybe two roads between your property and the Blue Grizz property. Is that a fair description?
That's correct.
And what, those two fields, what's grown in those fields, if you know?
Currently, they just harvested wheat, and then usually they have beans or corn in the fall.
All right. You referenced increased traffic. The employees to the grow house have a separate entrance off Able Road, correct?
That's partly correct, but they actually do enter the backside of the property, which is off of Gerards Cove Road, where I live.
And you live much farther away from that entrance, right? So in order to get to your property, you would actually have to go down Gerards Road and hang a right, correct?
Yes, I live off of Pleasant Harbor Way.
You also referenced some safety, some odor, some noise issues. Those are all issues and concerns that you've had with the grow house itself, correct?
Yes, that's
So those are pre-existing concerns, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Ms. Gibson, you didn't specifically mention the septic, so are your concerns here really related to the grow house, or are they related to the septic or septic capacity?
I am concerned about the septic as well, most especially because the tributary runs right up behind the property, and it is in a critical area.
How familiar are you with the grow house's septic?
I'm not very familiar, but I know it exists.
Okay, do you understand that the grow house's septic system has several different components to it?
Yes.
Okay. And are there any specific components of the septic system that you have complaints about?
I have concern about whether or not it will be substantial, and also if it's a danger to the water that's nearby. That's a concern of mine.
Ms. Gibson, do you understand that the scope of the challenge that you have raised in this case does not relate to the critical area or to runoff or to the waterway itself?
I don't understand what you're asking.
Okay. No further questions. Thank you.
So, the question.
Sure.
Back to the well, I know that in St. Mary's County, there's many wells that are hand dug. Is your well hand dug or was it drilled?
I believe it was drilled, and it would have been in 1959 when the house was built.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kimmy. Yes, of course.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to call Anthony Damron, if he's here.
Would you please stand, remain standing, and raise your right hand? Do you declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony, responses, and statements you may give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your name and address for the record.
Anthony Damron. I live at 21405 Canoe Neck Way.
Very much.
Okay. Anthony, thanks for coming. Can you identify what the green property highlighted there is?
The green property is where I reside, and it's been property in the family for 29 years.
Is it true that your mother owns that property right now, right?
That is correct.
Did you grow up on that property?
That's also correct.
Is this an image of you on Canoe Neck Creek when you were a child?
Yep, that was when I was 10 and I first got my boater's license in the county.
Great. And then how about this picture?
That was my little sister, and that was obviously a big bass that we caught in the creek.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to object to both that testimony and to the testimony that's going to be the next several 10 or more slides, because none of this has anything to do with whether or not this is an expansion of a nonconforming use.
Understood. Please proceed.
Please proceed. Thank you. So is it fair to say that you and your family have lived on that property and in this area for a long time?
Yes.
And you've used, you've used and relied on Canoe Neck Creek for recreational purposes and other purposes?
Absolutely. That was the main reason we moved down to this area in the first place. We previously resided in PG County, and we sought to move down to a more rural area so we could enjoy the waterways and fishing and boating and nature in general.
And thank you for that. And who else lives with you on this property?
Currently, my mother lives there partial time.
Okay, great. And do you have children?
I have two children that also I have joint custody with their mother, so the children are with me half of the time as well.
And so how do you and your daughters I'm assuming, how do you guys use the property and this area when you are there?
We spend a lot of time outdoors. I take them kayaking. We fish off the pier. They're still young, so we do some, fake rods and whatnot. We bike around the area. There's a restaurant down the street, Morris Point, where I'll put the girls in a bike trailer and ride our bike down there. So yeah, we play outside a lot.
And could you describe these images for me?
That is taken from behind the property with each of my daughters kayaking.
And that's in Canoe Neck Creek?
Yes, Canoe Neck Creek, yes.
Thank you. Now, since you've said you've been in this area for a long time, can you describe your recollection of how the property we're discussing today with the current warehouse on it, how did that look when you were growing up?
It much everything was fields around. You know, there's barns. We have a barn. We have fields. Pretty much that's the case for most of the surrounding properties. People might have a large, decent-sized property with a a field and some kind of modest-sized barn or outbuilding.
Okay, great. And were you notified that this property was approved to construct this warehouse?
Absolutely not. I was not notified, and I also, as far as I'm aware, neither my father nor my mother were notified as well.
So when did you first learn about the initiation of this project?
I think when I saw some of the construction going up in 2021 or 2022, I'm not sure exactly when, but it was when physical things started happening. I saw the fence in the backyard originally, but if you're having a fence on your property and you're growing crops or something, that I wasn't necessarily alarmed at that time until started seeing the large scale soil movement and all the impermeable surfaces that were being added to the property there in a floodplains area on the rural preservation zoning.
Thank you. And
Mr. Chairman, if I could just interrupt for a second, if I could just have a continuing objection, so I don't have to object to every question about everything related to the original grow house, the construction of the grow house, and, all of these attenuant documents that I assume we're about to go through.
A little closer.
I'm
A
sorry.
little closer to the mic.
Okay. If I could just have a continuing objection to all of the testimony about the original grow house, the construction of the grow house, any impacts caused by the original construction of the grow house, I submit again that is beyond the scope of what we're here. We're here on a very narrow appeal issue. I understand that that's probably what we're about to go through, and I just don't want to have to object to every single question, so I'd like a continuing objection.
Okay. That'd be fine.
okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Were you part of the group that helped advocate for the zoning text amendment?
I don't know that I specifically was part of that, advocating that amendment, but I was, once I became aware of things, vocal in opposition of the growth, just based on what should, the changes that I've noticed to the area and the runoff and things that I've been experiencing being on the water.
So in that vein, could you describe first what this image is?
This image is of Canoe Neck Creek. On the left corner is the edge of my father's property. In between here runs along where the grow house property is, and both sides here are adjacent to that property.
Okay, great. And then what are you observing on the right-hand side of the image in the water?
I took these images because I have been noticing large amounts of runoff into the creek, which alarmed me, and I have been seeking the county to take water samples and these type of things when I've noticed these observations.
Thank you.
Question? Did this sediment, as it looks to me, in the creek occur while they were constructing the septic system?
That I am not explicitly sure on, but it's absolutely where construction was. You can see in the top corner there all the dirt. There's some other pictures you might see where you'll see the large mountains of dirt that are situated just a little further north on the property, and it's been a continual thing. It's not one particular time or event. It's an ongoing issue.
Okay, thank you.
So could you describe for us this image?
This is another example of showing the runoff on a separate occasion. And if you look, you can follow the water trail going across the property straight down into the water. This has always been, it's a floodplain area on the zoning, the GIS map zoning. Everyone's kind of always been aware of these type of issues, which is why that kind of large-scale growth, to my knowledge, hasn't been allowed in the past, and why the zoning is the way it was. And you can see the large dirt mound in there. It's actually like a quarter of the size it was. They've been moving it around, but you can see the trails going straight down into the creek across the property.
Thank you. And are there any other changes? We have a few more images we're going to go through, but before I get to those, are there any other changes you've observed with how the property is used versus what it was like when you were younger?
Objection. Same objection. Thank you.
Yeah, before it was like like the adjacent fields were all, sorghum or wheat or corn. Similar to, that's what that property was used for before. I don't think it had the same amount of water runoff problems because there was much more vegetation there that was absorbing these type of issues, as well as there wasn't a mountain of dirt that's just continually been allowed to run.
Have you observed or heard, I suppose, any noises coming from the property?
I do hear the air movers, particularly at night or in the mornings, as mentioned before. But from my front door at night, it sounds like a vacuum cleaner a lot of the times. And it's my understanding that the facility's not even up to full scale, so I anticipate it becoming worse over time.
Thank you. And then we're going to go to the next image. Could you describe, is this just a zoomed-in version of that last image?
Correct. It's just another perspective from the same evening where I was taking footage from over our property, showing the water trail and showing where it seems to be stemming from.
And how about this image?
Another the same situation. You can see there's things floating. It's a continual stream. I mean, I don't know if you can tell from the pictures there, but there's just a trail of water, and it does that constantly, which is why I've been recording it.
And then how about this image?
More of the example of whatever it is mixing into the creek.
And how about this one?
A close up of so you can see kind of the coloration and what's going on better.
And what about this image?
More of the same things floating, not vegetation. There's also been, I've noticed there's been like dead fish and other things floating in the area where we traditionally can kayak up into this creek, this whole area here. And I've noticed there's, dead crabs, dead fish floating. And I do know that the dead zone from Canoe Neck Creek has been extended this year because of lack of oxygen and other things. So I just have to wonder if the addition of water runoff and fresh water into the creek would affect that. I don't know for sure.
And I just have a few. This might be, so these are the last two. So is this more of the same?
Correct, yep.
How about this?
Yeah, more of the same on a separate date. Unknown substance floating on the creek. It's nowhere else in any of the areas. I never see anything by, further out on the other side of the peninsula away from the farm. It's always adjacent to the fence areas, and we're coming off of where that concrete weir and retention pond is.
And you mentioned this briefly. Is this the same area you would take your two daughters that we saw in those images before?
That is correct. That the images taken were just a little bit further south, facing the other way. But we traditionally have gone up into the creeks and fishing and whatnot. I tend to avoid that area now because of the issues that I've been noticing.
And last thing for you, are there any other concerns you have about, for example, the expansion of the operations at this site?
Yes. So it's my understanding that because of the area, certain things won't perk. A side property doesn't perk. This doesn't perk. And we have small family homes, and if those small scale operations prove to be insufficient for any additional growth, there, I have a hard time believing that the adjacent property in between all these other issues can support that type of ecosystem scientifically. And with the retention pond being dug out, I think it was should have been a given that these overflow issues and whatnot were going to happen based on the impermeable surface that was added to the area in a floodplains.
Thank you so much, Anthony. That's the last question I have for him. So,
Any questions from the board members?
Yes, the same question I asked the lady before. Is your well a hand dug or is it drilled?
Ours was drilled, I believe.
Do you have a septic system?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bradley.
I have one to kind of expound upon the question you asked, Mr. Chairman. So can we go back 3 photos?
yeah, just tell me when. This one?
keep going. I think it was May. Right there. Yeah, that's good. Maybe a little farther back. So I'm also looking at the approval paperwork. Sorry. Also looking at the existing paperwork where it shows the existing sand mound and the replacement. And I'm wondering, to amplify on his question, that trail of water that's coming from that, is that coming from or near through where the existing sand mound or the proposed extension is? Is that runoff, as he asked earlier, is that coming from their existing sewage system? Where's that water coming from?
Would you like me to answer that question, or would you like Anthony? I have an answer, but whoever you'd prefer to answer that question.
I don't care.
Okay, so it's my understanding, if you see in this image, the square, it's slightly different colored in the middle of the property, which is, you know, just a little bit, I don't want to say south because I don't think that's correct, you know, objectively in the world, but let's say the top of this was north, it would be south of that drain. That's, my understanding is that's approximately where the septic system will be going. And I'm not sure exactly, as we mentioned, the proposed sewage reserve area is 17,700 square feet. I'm not sure how far that extends from that square that I believe is where they're proposing to install that septic system.
And if I could just add to that, that the septic system is already installed and it is approximately diagonal across, going southwest to northeast on that square. So it is already installed.
Anything to add?
It is installed, and I would like just to clarify, so when we say septic system, the septic system has different components to it. So it has a BAT tank, a best available technology tank, it has a pump tank, there's some piping, and then there's the sand mound, and the sand mound is like a leach field of sorts, but it's an engineered, it's an engineered leach field, and so it's not the septic system, it's just the sand mound that's right there, just for purposes of clarity.
Okay.
And if it's helpful, I guess to that point, when we're talking about the septic system, I'm generally referring to the entire system, all of the components, the sewage reserve area, the mound, the different tanks that they're using, if that's helpful, Peter. Okay.
So for my clarification, where exactly is this mound system?
If you look, I thought I had an image in there somewhere, but if you look on that square, it's the raised mound portion goes approximately, I think, up this way. I might have it on my phone. I don't know, but I don't know if that helps us. But
Oh, it's over there.
there's a new one that was placed, that was put in very recently already. The one in that is being appealed, I believe.
So one is a new one has already been installed.
I believe it was done either closely to or after when the last meeting was continued, but I'm not sure on that specifically. But I do know that it is recent, within the last couple months, I believe, based on, this is from April, and I have photos from today that would show the raised mound system that got installed.
Okay. Have you noticed that that little gut where where you notice the runoff, has it started to fill in?
Where do you mean?
The stream?
At the head of the creek, absolutely. And at low tides, it's much more apparent. But it used to be a continuous, and I believe it still is most of the time, but to a much smaller extent, a continuous stream. And my understanding of the tidal wetlands is that, based on the recent EPA decision with the Supreme Court, is that if there's a continuous stream, then it is subject to the Clean Water Act. And even with the additional runoff, it is way muddier, but there is still a continuous stream going from there up into the creek adjacent to the property.
Mr. Chairman, please note my objection both to the legal conclusions and descriptions and to technical environmental matters, which are both solely within the purview of the Health Department. They're not part of the site plan review, and they also require technical expertise, some kind of an expert to testify. We shouldn't be speculating on the record. Thank you.
Understand.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
If I may, we're all talking about a mound system that you've already put in, and it does have an impact. And that's why I asked the question, that's why I'm interested.
I understand.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
No, sir.
Mr. Hershey, any more questions?
Yes, yes. Mr. Dameron, so I believe you said, so you don't own the property you reside in?
That's correct.
All right, and so what is your arrangement for living there?
I don't believe my arrangement with who I reside with is any matter of this meeting.
So are you refusing to answer that question?
I answered it.
Are you a tenant? Do you have a written agreement of some sort with respect to your residence there?
This
And if I may, I don't believe that this is relevant, but if you wish us to continue.
Let's get straight here. Nobody wants anything to be relevant. We got.
I'll answer. Let's go. So this property has been in my family for 29 years, and it is going to stay in my family until I'm part of the earth at the very earliest.
May I say something?
No.
I'm the owner of the property, Anthony's mobile.
No.
I agree with him that whatever arrangements we
No,
have
sorry. I'm sorry.
are no business of anyone.
For the record, this is relevant to the standing analysis, which is why I'm asking it.
Okay. Continue your questions.
Thank you.
It's a family estate, and it's going to remain a family estate. We've had opportunities to sell or rent or do these type of things, and it's my intention to always stay there, to be there, and to take care of my surrounding environment and my community to the best of my ability.
Mr. Hershey.
Mr. Dameron, you referenced some noise. That noise is related to the grow house itself, correct?
I am not particularly sure where the noise is coming from, other than it's some kind of air moving systems and whatnot that come on. You can see the fans moving and whatnot.
Can we agree that it's not the septic system that's creating that noise?
I could agree with that. However, if the septic system is allowed to expand, then the growth expands. Then I can naturally assume that there's going to be more. If you go from 25 employees to 75, that's a 200% increase. So I've naturally think that there would be a 200% increase in activity by some measure.
Am I correct in saying that you don't have personal knowledge as to whether anything related to the septic would result in additional noise?
I could say that I don't have personal knowledge of these things because most of it was kept highly secretive until it was already built.
Mr. Dameron, are you aware that with respect to building permits, there are no public hearings that are held?
It was my knowledge that something of this nature was supposed to have public hearings.
And Mr. Dameron, with respect to your runoff concerns, you are aware, I assume, that your complaints to MDE, that MDE actually sent inspectors out and found that the site was in compliance. Is that correct?
That is partially correct. MDE did send an inspector out. However, they have refused to take any water samples, which is dating back to over a year now. I specifically have requested water samples taken because I've sent my own in and get nothing back. So I requested the MDE come out and take samples. What the MDE did was they submitted a report with visual inspections. And in that visual inspection, they also noted that the sediment bags were full, and they instructed the company to change out their sediment bags. They weren't cited, and no water samples were taken.
Mr. Dameron, so some of these photographs that you show of runoff, can we agree that those were all taken before this sand mound we're talking about was installed? For example, in April 2023,
These ones, if you
2022.
if you go back one, you can see it. You can see the difference from April to May. That's where they were putting it. You can see it on that picture. So yeah, prior to April, I guess. But this one, it says May. It might have been June, but either way, I digress on that. But you can see the mound being built right there, and literally, the difference between this one and the April one, you see it start being built there.
Mr. Dameron, and do you understand that the issue on appeal that has been raised on your behalf relates solely to whether this is an expansion of a nonconforming use and does not relate to this runoff issue that you're bringing up?
I disagree that it doesn't relate because it's all this earth moving on a floodplains absolutely impacts the runoff, the amount of runoff. Agree to disagree on that one.
And Mr. Damon, you're aware that the property did perk, and there was a perk permit that was issued for this
I'm
system?
aware that the paperwork says that it was perked, but I also have requested all the scientific methods and the testing and the data showing those perk tests, and I don't think I have received those. I could be wrong.
And Mr. Dameron, you understand that those perk tests and all of the environmental reviews and other things related to the septic system are performed by the health department, which acts as a state agency in that capacity. Is that correct?
I do believe that, but again, I don't believe the health department or several of these agencies have been acting in good graces within their established guidelines.
No further questions.
Any other questions from the board?
No, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much, Anthony. All right. Next, I'd like to call Joe Quinnett.
Mr. Quinnett, would you raise your right hand? And do you declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony, response, and statements you may give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Would you state your name and address for the record?
Joseph Quinnett.
Your name and address for
You
the
might need
record.
to use the microphone.
Joseph Quinnett, 2176 George Cove Road.
Thank you very much. You all may proceed.
Thank you, Joe. So can you identify for us what property is highlighted in green there?
The green highlighted area is the property that I own
Thank you. And how long have you owned that property?
since 2019.
And who else lives there or visits there with you?
It's me and my family. I have a friend from childhood that the three of us have bought the house. It was my grandparents' house that they actually bought in 1950.
And speaking of your grandparents, how did your grandpa end up buying it? Did he move there initially, or how did that work?
He grew up in the creek. He knew the farmer at the time, and he purchased the land from the farmer in the 1950s as a retirement place for him and his wife, my grandmother.
And one other question, did your grandpa have specific interests in the area?
He, like I said, he grew up in St. Mary's County. He was the county historian for St. Mary's County for 1975 to 1984 and his death. And he left the house to his daughter, which would be my mother. She since passed away and left it to me and my brother and my sister, which at the end of the day, I bought them out with my wife and a childhood friend.
And do you have any specific intentions or ideas of how you'd like to use the property in the future?
We use it for weekend getaways. Hopefully it'll be a retirement home at some point, and it's a place where my kids come to spend time on the water and enjoy quiet weekends.
So would you say that you and your family use Canoe Neck Creek?
All the time.
What other activities do you do in Canoe Neck Creek?
Water sports, fishing, crabbing.
Okay, great, thank you. And do you have any specific recollection of how the subject property looked or was used before the warehouse was constructed?
It was all farmland.
And did you receive any notice that the warehouse would be constructed?
No, I did not.
And how did you first become aware of it?
Slowly saw construction and then talking to my neighbors.
And did you advocate at all for the zoning text amendment that prohibited these types of uses in this zone? Or no? If you didn't, that's
I'm not sure.
okay. And could you describe for us what this image shows?
That would be my house.
And then how about this image?
That would be looking out to Canoe Neck Creek.
And then how about this image?
That's looking out our driveway.
And can you describe for me how the property with the warehouse, how does that look now?
How does it look now?
Yeah.
To me, it looks like an industrial park.
Okay, thank you. And last question is, if there's any impact, how does this warehouse currently impact you and your family?
My big worry is the septic system and the possible runoff, if there was ever a problem, that it would run off into the creek.
And again, to clarify, that's the creek that you and your family use consistently?
Correct.
And you physically get in the water there?
Correct.
Thank you. I think, is there anything else that you'd like to share?
But, just worried about what's going on over there, and don't quite understand why what's going on is going on.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have for Joe.
Any questions from the board members?
No, sir.
Sir.
Mr. Hershey?
Just one question. Just for clarity, you are not a protestant, correct?
Yes, I'm protesting.
I mean, you're not a party in this case, correct? You're just being called as a witness.
Yes.
Okay. No further questions.
Thank you.
Joe?
Thank
Is Robert here? Robert, would you like to testify?
Sorry, I didn't know I was speaking.
I know,
but
sorry, just
I'm
bringing it
here.
on you.
Good evening. Would you raise your right hand? You declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony, responses, and statements you may give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
For the record, would you state your name and address?
Robert Russell, 21585 Gerards Cove Road.
Have a seat.
Thank you. Okay, Robert, can you identify for me what the property outlined in green is?
That's my residence.
And how long have you lived at that property?
Since 1990.
And who else lives with you at the property?
My wife, 2 children, and 3 dogs.
And could you describe this image for me?
That's my residence.
What about this?
That's looking out the front towards the creek.
And how do you and your family use your property or Canoe Neck Creek?
Quite a bit of fishing, crabbing, water sports, swimming, etc. Whatever you can do in the water, we do it.
Got it.
Mr. Chairman, for this witness as well, I'd like just to continue an objection that a lot of the subject matter is outside the scope of what is before the board.
Understood.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
Were you notified that the property was approved to build the warehouse?
No.
How did you first become aware of it?
Truly, the first time we really became aware of it was when the slab began to get built. Even when the first chain link fence with the Constantine wire and barbed wire topping got constructed, when asked by the then property owner, we were told that it was going to be a hemp field, that nothing was going to be built there. Well, surprise, surprise, here we are.
Thank you. And so you said you bought the property in the 90s, is that correct?
1990.
1990. So it's fair to say that you've lived there about 33 years, that's the right number?
Yes, and I actually grew up at the property adjacent to that, which is my parents'.
I'll go back. Could you point it out?
Yeah, just to the north, west of my property, the property that butts up to it.
Okay, so could you describe for us how you recall the subject property, the property now with the warehouse? How was that used in the past that
It
you've
was
observed?
just farm fields.
Same as the other-
Soybeans, corn, wheat.
Got it, thank you. And how has that changed?
It's changed drastically. We have Walmart in my backyard.
And how, last question, last 2 questions, could you describe this image?
That is the view from my driveway. To the left, the gray building, black roof, that is the research and development building. To the left of that is where all the new septic is. The tan-sided building is a garage. Just past that is Mr. Mattingly, who's a previous property owner, his residence. And then you can see on the right, the end of the Walmart, as I call it, the grow house sticking out.
Thank you. And how has the current use impacted you and your family?
Considerably more traffic on Gerards Cove Road, to include numerous sightseers, because everybody wants to see the 52,380 square foot building that got somehow constructed in critical areas. And my driveway, if you can go back, has a turnaround kind of right on the road. So now everybody wants to turn around at my house. And again, if you're coming in Gerards Cove Road, the back entrance, which contrary to popular belief is used every day, there is a steady stream of traffic there at 0700 in the morning and a steady stream all day, to include delivery trucks, septic trucks, you name it. They're in, they're out, on Gerards Cove Road and going into the back portion of the property.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, what was the last part of the question? I think I
How
left
has
something out.
how has this been impacting you and your family under the current level of operation?
Well, I have no view. The noise is quite substantial coming from the air handlers. The runoff in the creek, I've seen it. I'm right around the corner from where Mr. Dameron and Mr. Quinnett's properties are. It's just totally changed the entire makeup of the area.
Thank you. That's the only question. That's the last question I have.
Any questions from the board members?
No, sir.
One question. You talk about runoff. I've looked at all these pictures, yours and the previous people. The land looks pretty flat to me. How much runoff do you really get?
Depends on how much it rains or how much dirt is being moved, or how big the mound of dirt is that is sitting from a 52,000 square foot building being constructed.
On your property, is there any runoff?
I have zero.
Thank you.
And also, I think a couple people had different questions about wells. Every resident on that road is on the same aquifer, which happens to be the same aquifer that they've drilled all of their wells on.
And how deep is that?
When I redid my well 20 years ago, don't hold me to this, somewhere, it's a more shallow aquifer.
What's the name of the aquifer?
600-ish square foot. Somebody. Aquia aquifer.
Thank you.
Mr. Hershey, any questions?
Just a few. Mr. Russell, so you can't see the second sand mound from your property, correct?
No, because there's too many buildings, and you see the super attractive black tarp on the chain link fence with the Constantine wire topping. That's why I can't see it.
The sand mound's actually behind those trees over on the left of that picture, isn't that correct?
Yes, but that's kind of a crappy angle. From other parts of my property, I would be able to see that.
And those public spectators that you testified to drive down Gerards Cove Road, they're coming to see the grow house building, correct? They're not coming to see the second
Well, they're
sand.
coming to see the whole debacle that's happened in Abel.
You can't see the second sand mound from that road, correct?
I don't know. I don't pay that much attention to it just because the building's blocking everything, as well as a nice tarp.
No further questions. Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Russell.
Thank you.
I'd like to call Tom Haney. Is he still here? Oh, it's okay. I didn't do a good job of speaking into the mic.
Would you please raise your right hand before you sit down? Do you declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony, responses, and statements you may give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Would you state your name and address for the record?
Tommy Haney, 38810 Collinwood Road.
Have a seat.
Okay, Mr. Haney. So do you own property near the property that we've been talking about today?
I own 55 acres, 2,000 feet away. own 4.5 acres, the other 2,000 feet away.
And how,
One way, the other way.
yeah, and how do how long have you owned those properties?
2005 and 6.
Okay, and how do you use those properties?
One is a business, one is I have in rural preservation. One is my home,
Oh, yeah, you have to make sure you speak into that.
and one is my home. Boating, fishing, whatever, my kids and stuff use it.
So is your home near Canoe Neck Creek?
Yes, it's on Canoe Neck Creek.
Okay, great. And the property you have in rural preservation, what is on it right now?
Nothing but trees.
Okay, great.
And I have 3 acres of commercial property there.
And so you said 2005 and 2006, that's roughly a little bit less than
no, it's
15 years.
15 years.
So how did the subject property, the property we've been talking about today, how did that look when you first bought your properties?
Farm property, yeah.
And were you given any notice about,
No.
and how did you first become aware of the
Well,
wells?
first there was amount of dirt must have been 300 feet high. And everyone knew what was going on when they were building the original little house, the little building. And then, and I'm sure with that much dirt, impossible to have runoff. You can put all the silk fence you want up, it'll take it right out. Okay? I don't know if anybody knows about construction, but yes. But anyway, when the big buildings started going up, that's when the issue was coming up. But never got a notice, one or nothing. But I couldn't get over, I watched them. I know the people that did the excavation work. And they had what they call a soil maker, okay? The mound systems will probably not work. Do you know how a mound system works?
I do.
Objection.
You do.
But let's
Objection.
move
But-
back to
Okay,
what we were
but
talking
anyway, the
about.
soil conservation.
Sorry.
I think we're getting well far afield. The mound systems are approved by the Health Department pursuant to state law. pursuant to
Understand,
very-
I'm trying to explain something to you, sir.
Just let me know my objection.
Okay.
Yeah, when he objects, we're just gonna let him say his
Okay, I'm
objection,
sorry.
and then we'll go back to ours.
All of those matters are within the exclusive jurisdiction of the Health Department. The proper approvals were made. And in addition, all of that testimony are matters of technical expertise that would require expert testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. I heard your objection. Please
Okay,
proceed.
so
So
to
septic.
summarize,
Okay.
you first became aware that something was being built when you physically saw changes
Yes,
to the
ma'am.
property. Okay, great. And can you describe what the property looks like now?
Industrial site,
Okay, great.
know?
And how do you feel like the current operations as they are tonight, or as they are today, how do they impact the community, potentially your property or other
Oh, my
areas?
God, it's radical. People's gonna have a hard time selling their homes. They have a hard time selling their homes down there now. 2 real estate people I know, as soon as they find out it's in pot area, they don't even want, says it's too hard to sell. So, the property values have dropped drastically down there already.
Mr. Chairman, objection moved to strike. Lay witnesses cannot testify to impacts to property values moving forward. This case is only about the sand mound and whether the property, the proposal is an expansion. That's all this case is about. And certain rules have to be followed. There is an evidentiary record here that has to be maintained. Thank you.
Understand your objections. Please continue.
Do you have any specific concerns about locating a septic system of the capacity being proposed in the location that's being proposed near Canoe Neck Creek?
Let me get something straight about septic system. You all talk about a septic system and a mound system is 2 totally different things. A septic system has a holding tank, okay?
And
That it has
sorry to
drain
interrupt
fields.
you real fast. Let's keep this general about what
Okay.
your concerns are about a septic system generally, although I'm sure you're very knowledgeable about the subject, but we're not offering you as an expert, so.
How do we know that he's very knowledgeable about that? What is his qualification?
Because I'm not offering him as an expert, so that's why I'm asking him to focus more on what his concerns are about a
Okay.
septic system in that location.
All right.
Yes.
I know y'all keep hearing y'all talk about septic systems, mound systems. They work totally different, okay? It's not the same thing. Your water goes out, your wastewater goes out to the mound system. You have vents onto it. It evaporates through the air. And then the filter and some of the water drains back through the ground again. But the problem I was going to try to tell you is when they built the place in the critical area, it was so swampy that they had to put lime and concrete into the dirt to make the compaction right. Well, if you have that much into it, it's not going to work. Okay, and then on top of that, everybody that lives on that road has ever went down it, all the trees on the front side, every one of them, you can't grow one of them little cypress trees. Every one of them is dead. Now, the only thing, now on the far corner of the property, there's one green tree over by the transformers in the electric box. That's green, and they probably didn't buy the property there, but everything else dies that they put there. So that tells me that, we must have killed a lot of species or, critical things. So, but yes.
Mr. Chairman, please note my objection to the testimony concerning how the specific septic system and mound was constructed. The witness can testify as to what he saw and observed or, the site senses, but cannot testify to things he does not have personal knowledge of. Thank you.
Okay.
You're saying I didn't have personal knowledge of it?
I think we're just going to leave it at that, if that's
Okay.
all right. Thank you. That's my last question.
All right.
Any other questions from the board members?
Yes, Mr. Honey, you mentioned the septic tank is a holding tank.
Yes, sir.
For how long?
Well, until it gets full. Most of your mountain systems have an alarm on them, okay? When the tank starts getting full, they alarm you, okay? But you don't have drain fields. You have a pipe going out to the mound system, okay? And now all that is pumps the wastewater right off the top.
So go back to the septic system, and you got the holding tank, and you got the lines going out. How long will stuff be in the holding tank?
Oh, until it fills up. Your solids will go to the bottom, your water will come to the top.
Okay. If you were to leave your quarters for 2 weeks, would the holding tank be empty or full?
Oh, I mean, whatever, the settlement would be, the pipes only go so far off the top, and then there's pumps that pump the water out to the main system, to the mound system. It's not like your regular conventional septic system where you have a tank, the pipes are so far up, your toilet paper, your solids, everything all go to the bottom, and the water goes out through your drain fields. Now, if you let that one clog up, then you have problems. Your drain fields don't work because it gets clogged with the paper and stuff. So you
Okay.
can't, your
Back
septic
to my
system
question.
work.
Back to my question. In the holding tank, if you were to leave your quarters for 2 weeks, would the holding tank be empty or full?
Well, it'll come down to a certain level and wouldn't go no more.
Empty or full?
Excuse me?
Would it be empty or full?
Oh, it would be at the same level. Usually at 3/4 levels is going to be full. Oh, now maybe you might have some that evaporates, but see, the mound system is
No,
not
go
part of
back-
the tank.
Forget the mound system. Go back to the septic.
Okay.
Would
Oh,
the
septic
Would the
tank.
holding tank be empty or full?
Oh, no, it would keep to a certain level unless you pump it out. Once your solids come, your tank will stay at a certain level, whatever your solids are, okay? But the water will come to the top. Then the water will drain off of that. But if your tank is full of solids, it will stay in the tank. It's not gonna go unless you overfill the septic tank, then the solids go through the pipes. But we're not talking about it, we're talking about a mound system, okay? you're talking about a conventional septic system, old-style conventional septic system.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Haney, did you say you had a business down there?
Yes, sir.
How many employees do you have?
I only have two people that we only go there part-time. I got another business in Waldorf.
Okay.
Commercial, yeah. I mean, we do operate out of there a little bit.
So 2 part-time?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Mr. Hershey?
One question, and just so how do you say your last name again?
Haney.
Haney? Okay, Mr. Haney.
A-Y-N-I-E.
Just for clarification purposes, you are not a party in this case, correct? You're just.
I don't know
you're-
why I'm not, but I should be on the list.
For purposes of tonight, you're just being called as a witness,
Okay.
isn't that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I thought I was on the list. Okay.
Thank you. I think, is there
That
any
it?
other?
Thank you, Mr. Haynes. That's it, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay. I'd like to call Robert T.
Would you raise your right hand, sir? You declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony, responses, and statements you may give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you state your name and address for the record, please?
My name's Robert T. Brown, Sr. I live at 38232 Palmer Road, Coltis Point, Maryland.
Thank you very much. Please have a seat.
All right, thank you, Mr. Robert T. So you mentioned where you reside, but do you have a specific interest in the area or property near the property that we're discussing today?
Yes, I do. Canoe Neck Creek. At the mouth of the creek, I have 18 acres of oyster lease. Within the past 2 years, I've planted approximately 14 million oysters on it. It's private lease that I own. Well, you lease it from the state. I'm into aquaculture. I'm a commercial fisherman. I fish in Canoe Neck Creek, right across from where Kim is at. I fish in the spring of the year there for gizzard shad. Gizzard shad is a fish we used to call a trash fish. It's a bait fish now. That bait fish, I catch it, I sell it to Bevins Oyster Company in Kinsale, Virginia. He freezes it and it's shipped down to Louisiana for crawfish bait. I caught as much as 18,000 pounds of these gizzard shad there a couple years ago, right in that creek, and you catch maybe, you go up there, and some years you hit them, and some years you don't, but we've been successful that we catch a decent amount of fish there every year.
Okay, great. So to clarify, you have a lease where you harvest and grow oysters?
Yes.
And that's in Canoe Neck Creek, and then you also sometimes catch bait fish in Canoe Neck Creek?
Yes.
Okay, great. And how long have you been doing that in Canoe Neck Creek for?
I guess I've been fishing in that creek probably about 12 years.
And
prior to that, I fished all other places, but we were fishing primarily for food fish.
Got it.
It's just over the past 12, 15 years that has, the demand for it has came up.
Have you lived or used Canoe Neck Creek anytime in your past or near that area when you were younger?
Crab trot lined a little bit into it when I was way younger, years ago, yes.
Okay, great. And so have you ever seen the property that we were talking about?
Yes, I have. I know it very well. Back in the 60s, I used to travel by it every day on a school bus when I was in grade school. The land right through there and pretty much all through the 7th District is a lot of what we call white oak land, which it doesn't take water very good.
And so is it fair to say that the way the property looked then is very different than how it looks now?
Well, it's an industrial complex at the present time.
Okay, great. And the last question I have for you is, do you have any concerns about the proposal to add that additional septic system in close proximity to Canoe Neck Creek?
Yes, I do. I got some problems with it because how well is the system going to hold up there? As a matter of fact, you have to have a perk test to get your mound system and stuff in. And I've got a picture here, which was taken by a drone prior to that system. Why would a person tarp the place where they're going to have a perk test? Got the picture right here where they had the mound system applied for, they tarped it. You tarp something to keep it dry, so it would perk. So, I mean, it's documented, we got it. I think that one of the reasons this was done so it possibly would perk. I heard that they had problem getting it perked the first time. They had to get a soil specialist down, so I've been told, to examine it. And yet we got pictures of where it was tarped.
And if I can go back to generally,
And
yeah.
if the system doesn't work right, it will leach out into the creek. And we got all these oysters planted down the mouth of it. You have, I don't know what effects it would do to the fish itself and stuff into the creek at that time. Plus, with the building there, you got the elevation of the land has raised. You can see it just by driving through it if you know the land, because I go down to Jimmy Morris's to get crab pot line and rope and stuff like that. And prior to that, both fields on both sides were kind of level, and it's built up on the other side. So the elevations in, all that impervious surface, you got water that's going down in that creek you saw there, plus you got it runs down the end of Gerard's Road and into the creek. So we have grave concerns about water quality.
And do you have any concerns about the degradation of the water quality in Canoe Neck Creek impacting your lease?
Objection. Same objections. It's not within the scope of what's been appealed, and we're strictly talking things that are now within the exclusive jurisdiction of the Health Department.
I'm going to answer that question because I was contacted by the MDE that the creek, the pollution line in the creek, it has always had a pollution line up in the creek a ways and has already moved down the creek. Now, I'm not saying where it came from or what caused it, but it has already moved down the creek.
And so what happens if the pollution line, that can be caused by multiple things, what happens if that reaches where your lease is?
Well, it's already moved down further, and if we have any kind of other spills up there or whatever is causing it, and something adds to it, it will prevent us from, it will close down that oyster ground I got at the mouth of the creek. It's not that far from my ground, probably 1,000 feet.
So
And
is
it's
it,
another commercial man who, Mr. Morris, who's got oyster ground just above me a little bit, and it's probably only 200 feet from his property where his lease is now.
and so if I can clarify, if the pollution reaches where your lease is, you're prohibited by law from harvesting those oysters because they would have contaminants in it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And would you still have to pay for your lease to maintain that spot, even though you wouldn't be allowed to harvest any of the oysters?
Or if you don't pay for your lease, it's like a lease on anything else, you automatically lose it.
Even though you wouldn't be able to harvest?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Any questions from the board members? Mr. Hershey?
Mr. Brown, how long is Canoe Creek in distance?
I didn't hear you.
How long is Canoe Neck Creek?
I'd say Canoe Neck Creek is close to about a mile long.
All right, and is it fair to say that your lease is so roughly a mile from the Blue Grizz property?
Maybe 3/4, maybe a little less. But the pollution line is within about 1,000 feet of my land now, my property. So it is more pollution that comes into that creek that will move it down that far and could affect me very soon.
Mr. Brown, you referenced perk testing. Are you aware that the soil is saturated as part of the perk testing requirements?
I didn't hear you.
You referenced perk testing. Are you aware that as part of the perk testing requirements, they make sure that the soil is saturated?
Does that have to do with putting tarps on it?
If you could just answer my question.
You didn't answer mine.
I'm the one asking questions here. You're the witness answering them.
I know that certain regulations has got to pass, and I don't know exactly what they are. I mean, I have a mound system of my own on my own place. I know what I had to go through, but I didn't have to tarp my land to get mine to perk for a mound system.
And Mr. Brown, you don't specifically know anything about how this mound system works, correct?
I know a little bit about how they work. I got one.
You don't know anything about this specific system, correct?
No, I don't know. It shouldn't be no different than any other mound system.
That's your opinion?
Yeah, the only thing would be different in size.
Have you spent any time familiarizing yourself with this specific mound system?
No, I have not.
All right. And you referenced kind of loosely leaching into the creek. You don't have any specific facts or observations of any kind of leaching into the creek from the sand mound, correct?
All I know is that the more water that you get, whether it's storm water or that they had, and we had a lot of that this year, and it was laying all across the ditches. They were all full until they made some adjustments so it would run off the land. It affects the creeks. Any water that comes into the creeks is affected. Any type of fertilizer and stuff that you use on the land affects the water when you have rains after it. Any type of pesticides, if you use them, that affects it, or herbicides.
So just to be clear, your concern is really about surface water runoff into Canoe Neck Creek?
No. I'm worried about the surface water, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about the mound system and possibly a failure in a mound system that could affect my livelihood and other watermen in the state. And I represent the Maryland Watermen Association for the state of Maryland. I'm the president of it.
I'm going to object. He can't testify on behalf of an organization unless he goes through certain procedures, which he hasn't done here. No further questions.
May I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
Are you aware, or do you have any knowledge about issues with septic system failure impacting the water quality in Chesapeake Bay generally, and then potentially Canoe Neck Creek?
Objection, he's not an expert.
I'm not offering him as an
Environmental
expert.
issues are not within the scope of either a site plan review or this appeal.
Respectfully, he asked the question of whether or not he's concerned with the
I'll
septic
allow it.
system
Go ahead
failure.
and ask the
Thank
question.
you.
Yeah, I'm concerned about it failing. And when septic systems fails and when you have fallouts, it does close our bottom. Just last week, they had a big spill in Virginia, and it closed the Potomac River down about 15 miles of it on both sides.
Thank you.
So I am aware of it, and I am aware of how bad some of the septic systems and sewage treatment plants work throughout the state.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I do. So I know that when they do when they do perk test, they do that during the wet season, so they can see how quickly the water seeps through. So I'm kind of curious about the tarping.
Well, if you put
Was that done prior to the perk test? Was it done after the first perk test and the second? Because we have a couple exhibits here, G, I think, and F, where it says that the perks,
To my knowledge, it was done prior to the perk test.
the first one or the second one?
It would be the second one.
And if I may, we do have images if the board would like us to supplement our exhibits with those images showing the tarp over the area we're talking about. I'm happy to provide those after the hearing. I just didn't prepare those for this specific hearing.
Could we have that entered into evidence, those pictures?
If you would like, yes.
I would like that.
Okay, great. I'll follow up with how to best do that.
Any other questions?
And the dates that was done, relative to the perk test.
If I could ask one more question as a follow-up to that question.
Sure.
First of all, Mr. Brown, you understand that the health department is actually the agency that does the perk testing, correct?
A little louder. I'm a little hard of hearing.
Sorry, my apologies. You understand that the health department is the one who actually does the perk testing for properties, correct?
Yes, the health department does it, but things can be done to land prior to it when you tarp it, that it doesn't absorb the water.
Mr. Brown, you understand as well, you mentioned concerns about failing septic systems. You understand that this is a relatively recent septic system, and do you understand that it has best available technology and a fairly technologically sophisticated system as well? Do you understand that?
I know that they work well in a lot of places when the test is done without land being tarped. That's my opinion.
No further questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brown.
Any more? If we could, is the board ready for about a 10-minute break?
Yes.
Can I just ask one question?
Sure.
Because I might forget it. I don't know if I can ask you, Mr. Hershey.
Sure.
So you're talking about septic mound system, and then you've kind of made some indication that maybe the one that Mr. Brown was talking about in yours might be a little different. Is the mound system that Blue gets put in something special?
So
Are we talking about a
every-
mound system?
Every septic system has different pieces, right? And the mound is only one piece of the septic
Right.
system. And so this system, you get the grow house, the building. You have a BAT tank, which is a best available technology tank, which is a treatment tank. And those are pretty onerous requirements that the health department requires buildings to get. It goes, the effluent goes from the BAT tank, it gets treated, it goes to a pump tank. After a certain period of time, it eventually will go to the sand mound. The sand mound is not the same as a leach field, but that's kind of a helpful comparison to some extent. And so what it is the sand actually helps further treat and helps further infiltrate. And so it does it in a way that kind of mitigates concerns that would be caused by normal leach fields, if that makes sense. And so when I say that there are differences, one of the differences here is we have a very technologically sophisticated BAT treatment system. And we have a different design. There's actually an engineer here that specifically designed this system for this site. So it's not the same as sand mounds are designed, so there's some variation between the systems, but we have a specific system here designed for this site with certain very technologically sophisticated, environmentally protective features.
Does that mean that you have to get it put in before it's been approved? Because it's so technologically advanced?
Can you repeat the question?
Does that mean that you have to get it put in before it's been approved?
No, you get the approvals from the health department and you can put it in based on the health department approvals.
So when we go through Exhibit F and G, we'll see where the health department didn't do that.
One more time, I'm sorry.
When we go through Exhibits F and G, because the health department didn't really talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if I may, just one last point on that. It's my understanding, if we're going to talk about septic systems, that all septic systems in Maryland this close to the water require the BAT technology. And there's varying types of BAT technology. Some is more efficient than others. And I mean, we're getting into the technical details that will be at issue at a different appeal that's not necessarily before this board. But that's my understanding. And also, we don't know what type of BAT technology Mr. Robert T. Brown has on his property to know whether or not they're different in any meaningful way. So I just wanted to add that as well.
Okay.
And I have something to say after we're done with Mr. Robert, if that's all right.
Should we can you do it after we come back from a break?
Yeah, I was just going to tell you that we have, I think at most 5 more people. They'll be very quick.
Okay.
But I just want to let you know that.
Let us still take a break and get back in at 8:55?
Yeah, 5:00.
Huh? 8:55. So we're adjourned. Gary, the younger guy that was
Well,
over
what
here.
happened to the old one?
I don't know, haven't the fog yet. He didn't look good. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
So you if she's got, did she say 5 years ago pretty quick?
Yeah.
I want to make sure we can see. He says it's about 20 minutes.
Okay. Okay, I thought I was going to do after that.
I'm
I was
so
gonna-
cold.
Okay, who's next? We're going to review what's
I look
what's
like
next.
you tonight. I'm spread right out.
Hey, I'm trying to separate them. This was the first meeting.
I'd like to call the meeting back to order, please.
Okay. Should I call the next witness?
Please do.
Okay, and to clarify too, I have Victoria, one other woman, and then a family, and then we're done. So hopefully it won't be too much longer for you all. Victoria, if you could come up.
Would you please raise your right hand? And do you declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony, responses, and statements you may give will be the truth and whole truth?
Yes.
Would you state your name and address for the record?
Victoria Brown, 38232 Palmer Road, Colton's Point, Maryland.
Thank you. Please sit down and let's go.
All right, thank you. So is it true that you're married to Robert T. Brown?
Yes, I am.
Let's make sure I use the, yeah.
Yes, I am, 13 years.
Okay, so are you also an owner or operator of the lease that he mentioned previously? in
Yes,
Queen-
I am the primary owner of Shop Cove Aquaculture as a female-owned business here in the 7th District.
And how long have you been using that lease that's in Canuna Creek?
We have had the business for a little over 10 years now, and I have contracts throughout the state of Maryland and in St. Mary's County, Charles County, Calvert County. We've done Kent County, Baltimore, a lot of different areas for the state. We have about 350 acres of bottom that we plant ourselves here in St. Mary's County. I've done restoration work in the Potomac as well.
And so in those 10 years, have you been using this lease that's in Canuna Creek for that 10 years?
Yes.
Okay, great. And have you seen the subject property before?
Yes, I have.
And do you know what it looked like before?
Yes, I did. When I first came here 13 years ago, it was a farmland.
And what concerns do you have about the proposal to expand this use to add septic system and additional employees?
With the expansion of a septic system and the mound system, I am very, very concerned about the waterways of Canoe Creek, of my lease. We've planted a lot of oysters there. I think it's more than 14 million that my husband said, but right now, a million spat on shell that goes overboard is worth $4,300. And I'm sure that we have probably more like about 18 million over in that one spot. So, and recently, this year alone, Canoe Creek has been shut down twice by the Department of Natural Resource and MDE. The first one was the area has expanded from the second time. It got bigger. Why? I do not have that answer, so I cannot tell you why that is. But I am concerned of what's coming from that property and what the expansion of additional sewer spills could happen. We've had sewer spills in this county, Down County, at St. George's Island, and we've had aquaculture people put out of business because of those spills. We've had spills in Baltimore. We have spills all over this state, and it affects the waterways and the environment of this water and the leases. And I'm only one leaseholder in St. Mary's County. There are a lot of watermen and private citizens in this county that have lease bottoms within this vicinity. Tides come in, tides go out. That waste and whatever is in the water that is polluting it, whether it be that or anything else, it's going to move through our waterway. It is a livelihood to our community.
Mr. Chairman, if you could just note my same objections that the environmental issues are both within the scope of the state agencies and also outside the scope of the instant proceeding, especially concerning the waters of the state of Maryland. Thank you.
Thank you.
And do you have any specific knowledge of the septic system proposed on this property that would cause you concern about its ability to
I do.
not pollute the water that might affect your lease?
When I first found out about this building going up, it was in February of 2022. I went to the first meeting, and I was very, very concerned about this building going up in a critical area.
What meeting was that?
It was a citizens' meeting at the firehouse held in Avenue,
Okay.
that all of the people that live in the 7th District didn't know anything about this. That was the first time I was even aware that there was a building going up or anything at all. I don't care about whether it's marijuana or not. What I care about is our environment and our waterways and what that's going to do. I met with the health department personally with Robert Russell in April with Heather, and I asked her about the pictures of the tarp and the backhoe that was sitting in those pictures that we had and presented to her, and said, why is this property being tarped? The first perks failed terribly in December. They brought a scientific specialist in, this is what I was told personally from the health department in Leonardtown, and Robert Russell was there with me, that they had to bring a soil specialist in. They tarped the land so it would perk. Now, that's what I was told directly from the health department in Leonardtown.
Okay.
So that's my concern. You expand it, what more is going to happen?
I'm just going to repeat my same objections. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the last question I have is, do you have any general knowledge about issues with how the failure of septic systems might impact watermen and your ability, for example, to harvest your oysters on your lease?
If Canoe Creek was closed down and this expands the pollution area, we are not allowed to harvest our oysters. And if that persists, we would still pay for our lease. We would hope for it to clear up someday, but we would have to move all of our oysters off of that bottom to a place where it's not polluted on another lease, which is labor intensive, so that those oysters could clean themselves before harvesting and not making anyone sick. So that, I am a huge concern of expanding anything at that property that may cause a spill from the septic or runoff.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Any questions from the board members?
Ms. Brown, you said the MDE closed it twice?
Yes, we have letters from the Department of Natural Resource that are issued to because my husband is the president of the Maryland Watermen's Association, we get it through the Maryland Watermen's Association, and as a leaseholder of Canoe Creek, I get a letter personally sent to me saying that it is polluted and what that area is.
That's what I was asking, and what specifically they closed it for.
They just say that it's polluted. It does not say. I personally, with Robert Russell, asked the health department to do a baseline of the creek when they were pouring the slab. When we met in April, well, I don't know when the slab was already poured. In April, we asked for a baseline so that we could test that water. My property is tested every 6 months. My water is tested every 6 months. And the health department comes to my place, they draw our water because we are fishermen. We harvest oysters. They are highly regulated. They can make people very sick if they're not regulated. We are fishermen, and we harvest seafood. So our water is tested because we have ice. We make ice. So that has to be tested. Every 6 months, the health department comes down and checks my records, all my tickets, all my books. Everything is checked. Everything is monitored, highly monitored. And we have a lot of things that we have to go through. So any pollution that hits the water affects the oysters and the fish.
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with this. What's the baseline? But
I asked the health department to get MDE to do a baseline. When Mr. Russell and I were
could
there,
you explain that for me, though? What exactly?
I wanted to find out what was in Canoe Creek's makeup of the water.
Okay.
And might I add to help? So you were asking them to have a test that you could then compare to a later test
Okay.
to see
Yes,
if there
sir.
was
Okay,
pollution.
thank you.
Yes. So that periodically, because I do work with the health department, and I also sit on the aquaculture council for the governor, that this water be tested, because I'm tested and they're right there, they can take it at the same time and test the water. I just wanted to make sure that what was ever going in the creek, we knew what the components of that was that was running into the creek. Nobody knows that today. We still don't have a baseline. Nothing's been checked. We never heard one word back after the request, and that was April of 2022.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board members?
Yes, when the creek was closed down because of contaminated, what was it contaminated from?
They did not say in the letter. When MDE issues a letter and the Department of Natural Resources issues a letter that the creek it just says that it is contaminated. It doesn't say what. It does not tell us. I have not been able to get that information.
Oh, thank you.
I think we could probably ask that question. You might be able to get the answer.
If I may add a question, do you know generally what type of pollutants would cause them to close a creek? If we don't, even if we don't know the
it's wastewater.
specifics. Yeah.
It's the one thing that will destroy an oyster is the wastewater. You know, sewage is the worst thing in the world. And that's what happened at St. George's Island that put that man completely out of business, was
But
sewage.
you just said it, you didn't know what it was. Now you're saying.
I
it's
don't
what-
know.
Okay.
I don't know.
I apologize if I made
I
that
just said
confused.
that is one of the things that could, and is the highest one that would affect shellfish and would close it down for human consumption or for any recreational use at all.
Okay, Mr. Hershey.
Thank you. You said you have an aquaculture lease. Is it a water column lease or a submerged bottom lease?
Submerged bottom,
All right, and you get that lease from the Department of Natural Resources, correct?
yes, I do.
And that's a state agency, correct?
Yes.
And the reason that the DNR issues aquaculture leases is because the water, the Chesapeake Bay, is owned and controlled by the state of Maryland, isn't that correct?
Yes, yeah, they lease it, yes.
All right, so the state is the one who regulates that water body, correct?
Yes.
No further questions.
Any more questions from the board? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Victoria. All right. We're nearing the end. Can I have Rose come up? Is she here? Is Rose here?
Would you please remain standing and raise your right hand? Do you declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony, responses, and statements you may give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Would you state your name and address for the record?
Rose Ellen Gwyther, 38530 Pleasant Harbor Way in Able.
Please have a seat.
Thank you.
All right. Can you please identify for us what the property outlined in green is?
That is my property.
Okay, thank you. Where did I do with the clicker? There it is. Okay. And can you identify for us what this is?
Yes, that is the south side of my home.
And how long have you lived in this home?
39 years.
And who else lives there with you?
My husband.
How do you and your husband use your property and the area around your property?
We enjoy the quietness. We enjoy the water. We crab, and we fish, and we get out on our paddle boat and our kayaks and our jet skis and that type of thing, and have family gatherings.
And when you go out on your kayaks and your jet skis, is that in Canoe Neck Creek?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Can you describe this image for us?
That is my view of Canoe Neck Creek from my home.
Thank you so much. And how about this image?
That's what I look at from, if I look to the south of my home, and it disturbs me a lot because I look at the grow house directly.
And what did that property look like before the grow house was built?
It looked like the farm, looked like the fields that you see between me and that property.
And what kind of changes have you observed now that the warehouse is at whatever capacity it's currently running at?
I hear a lot of noise. I get a lot of light intrusion. I just get a lot of depression because it's there. And I have a lot of concern for what's going to happen with the water
Yeah.
that I live with.
And speaking of water, Stacy, could you please pull up attachment 14, please?
Yes, give me just a moment.
Thank you. And you can mute this one.
Unmute it or mute it?
Mute it.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just note my objection. This has nothing to do with the scope of the appeal, and it's also has nothing to do with the septic either.
Understand. Thank you.
I would say it does have to do with the septic.
I'm sorry, could we just?
Did you
bef-
wanna
could
see
we
it
play
again?
it one more time and
Yes.
just pause it so I can just have Rose explain what it is? Did you take this video, Rose?
I took that video a couple years ago. I was walking, as you can see, there's no building there now. The barbed wire fence is up. Unknown to me what's going to happen to that field.
And is that where the warehouse
That's right
is?
where all that water is where the grow house is right now.
Thank you.
Okay.
So that was the conditions before the warehouse?
That was a lot of the conditions after a rain of about 2+ inches, we would get this all the time. Now, that water is going someplace else. And it can be going, and it could be, you could saturate the land elsewhere, which concerns me about the septic and our waterways and our neighbors.
So it's fair to say that you're concerned that the type of water, the amount of water that we're seeing on the subject property before the warehouse was built, you're concerned about where that water is going and how it impacts the area where the septic system is after it was built? Okay, thank you. And then what other impacts have you observed from the current level of operations at the warehouse?
I go out at nighttime, and I used to enjoy the night sky and the quietness, and now I hear humming. I feel like I'm in a beehive.
And if you will, could you, Stacy again, could you pull up attachment 17? Yes. Thank you so much. Before we play, could you pause it for me? Thank you. Could you put the sound on for this one? Yes. Before we start it, did you take this video?
I took that video just about, I don't know, within a month.
Yeah, I have June 2023 is the
Okay.
date I have.
Okay.
Okay, you can play it now. Thank you.
Unmute or?
Unmuted, yeah.
Okay.
And this is just taken with my cell phone.
And so that buzzing
Making
sound?
some That buzzing sound.
Is that different than what it sounded like before?
Oh, yeah, it wasn't there. I could hear the birds chirping or the frogs croaking or whatever, and I can still hear them, but I hear that.
More.
And that is very irritating.
And what about during the day? Do you hear noises during the day? as
Oh, yeah,
well?
I hear them during the day. They don't tend to be as loud during the day but I take walks down this road all the time. I bike a lot down this road, and I have to come within 50 feet of that building, and it's very loud. And,
Sorry to interrupt you,
Yes,
but
go
to
ahead.
that point, could you
Oh.
please bring up, Stacy, attachment 16? And this one will be with sound as well. And before you play it, I just want to clarify. So did you take this video?
I took this video. I was walking one day, and you can see that there's this berm out in the front. And I'm learning that berms are very effective. It has nothing to do with the septic system, before you object. But go ahead and play it.
Yeah.
So you can hear, the minute I clear that berm, it is loud. And we also would have liked to have a berm around this whole thing. But I didn't realize how much a berm would really do for you until I was walking that day, and I said, boy, this is really different. So I decided to take a picture of it.
And that level of noise was not there before this warehouse
Oh,
was
no,
there?
oh, no. I mean, soybeans and corn or wheat don't make any noise except for the rustling in the wind, which is very
And are
gentle.
you concerned that the noise might increase if the level of operations on the site
Sure.
increases?
I'm concerned, number one, they're saying that right now they only have 25 people, it can go to 75. A article that was in a paper a couple of years ago was touted by Mr. Mattingly that he was going to employ 100 to 125 people. So my concern over the septic system is, number one, they're asking for an expansion for a non-conforming thing from 25 to 75. Well, what's to stop them from doing another one from 75 to 100 and 125? Because later, as this operation gets bigger, they're going to say, oh, we need more septic. So that's another concern that I have, and this is a 24/7 operation. So this goes on day and night, all the time, at different levels. I will say it's at different levels right now, but with all equipment, this equipment is new. As equipment gets old, it will definitely be louder, just based on equipment that I have in my own house. It tends to make more noise as it gets older. So I'm just concerned about that. And I'm concerned about the 24/7 things, and I'm concerned about the increment. This place has been incremented since day one, since 2018. It was supposed to be a small greenhouse. Okay, that's what we were told. You won't know we're here. Those are the exact words we were given. Until February of 2022, when this big slab came along, and I said, boy, that's a big greenhouse. That was my thought. Oh, yeah, it's a Walmart, like somebody else said earlier.
And are there any other concerns that you have, for example, about the septic system, its location?
Well, it's
or-
close, it's concerned because of where it is. It's close to the critical area, if not in the critical area. And so the runoff and the failure, like Victoria was saying, is very possible. And this is very close to the water, much closer than where that that grow house is. So the septic system is off closer to the water, closer to the east.
And that's the water that you and your family use?
Yes, it is. And we're all in like somebody said, we're on the same aquifer.
Mhm.
So we're also concerned about what is that going to do to our wells? And that has nothing to do with the septic system. I know that.
Thank you. Is there anything else you want to share?
Not at this time.
Thank you.
Any questions from the board members?
No, sir.
Mr. Hershey?
Thank you. Is it Geither? How do you?
It's Gwyther.
Gwyther?
Mhm.
I apologize if I messed that up.
That's okay, everybody does that.
Gwyther.
It's not spelled like it is.
I will do my best. So you mentioned 125 employees from an article that you read a couple years ago.
Correct.
Are you aware that back in October of 2021, Lugum approved the architectural plans for the grow house, and that those plans had an actual expected occupancy of 125 employees?
Yeah, but the septic system only says for 75. So what's going to happen when the other 50 come along? That's my concern. This keeps getting incremented.
So, but just to be clear on my original question, you were aware that in October 21, Lugum approved the plans for the grow house for actual occupation by 125 employees?
I wasn't aware of it because we weren't aware of anything.
Are you aware of it now?
I am, I would have to go back to my paperwork and find out.
Okay.
And also, I'd like to object. Rose is not qualified to know what exactly Lugum approved or didn't approve in 2021. So.
Yes, no one told us anything, and we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know what we aren't being told because we were never told anything. So what are we not being told now about the septic system or future needs for a septic system?
My question was just whether or not you knew, but you've answered.
Okay, well, I answered
right.
it.
You mentioned wells.
Yes.
And you also referenced that those are not related to the septic. Are you aware that the health department also approves well use?
Correct, and they're supposed to be monitoring it, and we would really love to know what that is and if it really is being monitored, because there is a water requirement that they can only use every day. But we have heard nothing about that.
And you would agree that the well issue is outside the scope of the issues presented before the board tonight?
That's right, but it's still a concern. She asked me if I had any other concerns. Those are my concerns.
All right, and a lot of the concerns that you raised related specifically to the grow house, those are also outside the scope of the appeal tonight, correct?
That's true, but it all is entwined and it all plays a part in the septic system that they're asked to have, because they need to have this for the people in order to work there.
No further questions.
Could I ask a quick follow-up question?
Sure.
Thank you. All of the concerns that you've raised, are they all related to the concept of expanding the use at the property?
Yes.
Objection.
Thank you.
Objection. She already answered this question, contrary to that leading question.
Well, that's okay. She clarified for me.
Well, the attorneys aren't allowed to do that.
Okay. We're all learning. We're learning.
Yeah.
Nobody told us about this either. We're all learning.
Just note my objection for the record.
I will, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Oh, anybody else?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. Last family. Oh, my clicker's not working.
Okay, let's see if I can. It's just jumping around. Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Could I have Ruth come up?
Before you sit down, would you raise your right hand? Thank you. Do you declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony, responses, and statements you may give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
For the record, would you state your name and address?
Ruth Morris, and I live at 21517 Gerrards Cove Road in Able.
Please, thank you. Please have a seat.
Okay, Ruth, can you identify for us what is highlighted in green on this picture?
That is our home.
Thank you. And what about this image?
That is our home.
And how long have you lived there?
It'll be 24 years next month.
And who else lives there with you?
My husband and my 3 teenage daughters.
And how do you and your family use your property or the area?
We do a lot of outside things. As you can see, our pool is there. Summers, we spend most of the time on the deck. My girls play sports, so they're outside practicing field hockey, softball, soccer, between the 3 of them. So we spend a lot of time out there.
And so you said you've been there for a while. What did the property look like before the warehouse was constructed?
It was fields, beans, corn, or wheat.
Thank you. And were you notified of the construction of this building?
We were not.
How did you first find out about it?
We saw the slab after the barbed wire fence went up.
And would you say that the way the property looks now and the way it is used now is different from how it was before?
Absolutely. It's a warehouse now.
Thank you. And how do you think the current use, the current levels of use, how is that impacting your family as it is now?
Very much so. My 3 teenage girls have to meet the bus at the end of Gerrards Cove where it meets Able. So they have to walk by this facility to the bus stop if I don't take them, and home. And some of the employees are a little scary looking to them. They will text each other, watch out, there's so-and-so there. It's just, I'm concerned for their safety. There's much more traffic. We had an incident where we were waiting for the bus one morning, and an employee that went to that facility, because I saw where the car went, the bus was completely stopped at the end of Gerrards Cove Road on Able Road, and he never even slowed down, passed the bus with red lights, stopped. And I'm just concerned if we're going from 25 employees to 50 employees on this new sewage, who knows what they're going to be doing. We have cars that, they come down Gerrards Cove Road and access, there's a little red area that you could see that looks kind of like a driveway. Well, it is. That's how some of those employees access that property. And cars with no hoods come down there. I mean, it's just ridiculous, the things we see sitting at the bus stop. We have trucks where I've had to back up from the bus stop so they can turn down our driveway, the dump trucks. I mean, it's just has really affected our safety, as well as I'm concerned about all the other things that I know some don't affect the sewage, but I think it's going to increase employees. So, of course, that sewage is an issue.
And so let's go through some images. So what does this image show?
That is from the end of our driveway. That's what we see.
And On the left-hand side, do you see mobile homes?
Yes, there's 2 mobile homes, and then there's another home to the left of those.
And
And then
then-
behind that is the warehouse.
So that white structure behind there, that's the warehouse. That's what you can see from the end of your driveway.
From the end of our driveway, which is actually a better view than from our house.
So I'm going to have another image, but this is the road that your daughters walk down.
Yes, they have
get
to
the
walk from
bus
here all the way to the end of Dryades Cove on that very far right.
stop. Okay. And what does this image show?
This is the image from my kitchen window.
And what is that structure behind the chairs in that image?
That's the warehouse. That's the industrial building that's there that we see with the lights on at night.
And how about this one?
That's from the actual deck.
In that white structure in the back, that's,
That's that warehouse.
and do you see lights on that building?
They are on every night on both sides, all the way down the entire building.
And do those lights impact your use of your property?
Oh, they shine right in my bedroom window and light up my bed.
This an accurate depiction of the light shining from the warehouse?
That's
directly
my
into-
bedroom window. It shines right in onto our bed.
And those are up
every night.
24/7?
They are, when it turns dark, they come on.
Got it, thank you. And then, again, is this the,
That's from the other side. That's from I just turned onto Dryades Cove Road down, and our mailbox is way down there past the corn.
and is it my understanding that the bus stop is at the corner of Able Road, which would essentially be behind this car you see?
Correct. It's where Dryades Cove and Able meet.
Great, and that's like essentially where that car is parked?
Right, I would park the opposite direction in the mornings for them to get on the bus because I don't want them walking, and I'm there. I'm a teacher myself, so I have to be at school myself when they come home, so I can't go get them.
And is there any other concerns you have about the potential to expand the operations
I'm
at
just
this property?
concerned, now we have the smells. We woke up, it's been a nice spring, so we've had our house open. We can wake up in the middle of the night and you smell it in our house. My daughters smell it in our house. My daughter was 12 when all this started. She knows what marijuana smells like. I didn't know what marijuana smelled like until I was an adult. And that's just gonna become more if we have more employees on this new septic. It just concerns me that I don't wanna smell it in my house. I don't wanna smell it at my house. And it's gonna just increase. Like, we hear the noise as well. The windows are open, you hear those air handlers running. And it's not all of them running. I can't imagine what it's gonna be when they have more employees and more operation going on, what the sound's gonna be when they're all running.
And last question, just to clarify. I know the cannabis, you said, creates a smell. Is your issue with this project specifically about cannabis itself?
No.
Or is there another issue that you have?
I don't want that building there. I don't care if they're growing tomatoes in it, but I don't want the smell if they're growing cannabis. But I don't want that building there. We weren't told there was gonna be that building there.
So is it fair to say that if there is a industrial warehouse growing tomatoes inside and they were asking to add an additional 50 employees, you would have equal concern about the impact?
Absolutely.
Thank you. That's my only question.
Any questions from the board members?
Just one question. You mentioned the smell. You're the first person tonight to mention there's a smell.
There is. It's usually in the middle of the night or first thing in the morning.
It just seems strange. You're the first person tonight that's mentioned there was a smell. I don't remember any others. Thank you.
Okay. Oh. Mr. Hershey?
No questions, but I would also like to just object to general comments entering the record.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, our last two, our youngest of the night. Could I have Sarah come up, please?
Would you please raise your right hand? Do you declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony, responses, and statements you may give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you state your name and address for the record?
Sarah Morris, 21517 Dryades Cove Road.
Please have a seat.
Thank you, Sarah. So is Ruth, who just spoke, is that your mom?
Yes.
So you live in the same house that we were just talking about? And if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I'm 13.
And so you're in middle school now?
Yeah.
And this is the walk, is it true that this is the walk that you have to take to get to your house after the bus drops you off?
Yes.
And do you have any concerns that you're experiencing right now about that walk?
It's definitely a safety concern because I don't really feel safe when there's people I don't know coming from the back entrance. So I definitely do feel scared walking alone.
And do you have to walk alone right now?
Not right now, but next school year I will.
So next school year, so right now do you walk with your sister?
Yes.
And next school year, you won't, you'll have to walk by yourself, and you'd be what, 14 years old? Or
Yes, 13 and 14.
13 and 14. Do you have any other concerns about the proposal to expand the operations at this site?
Yes, I feel like with the operations expanding, there will be more
Hold on
people.
1 second there. Can you speak a little bit more to the
Sorry.
microphone? Thank you.
With the operations expanding, there will be more people coming down the road, and that definitely concerns me.
And do you feel, so your mom mentioned that you practice, what sport do you practice outside? Soccer. So you practice soccer outside.
Yeah.
Do you ever get uncomfortable practicing soccer outside because of people who work at that site?
Yes, I do feel like people can see me doing it, and it's a little uncomfortable.
And your mom mentioned that you and your sisters talk about sometimes giving each other warnings on your walk home. Is that true?
Yes.
And what are the warnings that you give each other?
There was one instance when my older sister, she got home before us, and there was this car, and she said, watch out, because it's creepy. You don't know who's in there. So we had to walk on the other side, because, we don't know who's in there. We don't know what's going to happen to us.
Thank you. And just one last question. So you said, right now you're walking with your sister, so you have that comfort. Next year, you'll not
I will
have
be
that.
completely alone.
Okay, thank you so much, Sarah. Is there anything else you want to share?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions from the board members? Mr. Hershey?
No questions.
Thanks, Sarah.
No questions.
Same objection?
Same objection, but no questions.
Thank you.
And last one, can I have Anna come up, please?
Would you please remain standing and raise your right hand? Do you declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony, responses, and statements you may give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Would you state your name and address for the record?
Anna Morse, 21517 Dries Cove Road, in Able.
Thank you very much. Please have a seat.
Okay, so Ruth who testified and Sarah who testified, that's your mom and your sister, right? And so you live at that same property with them?
Yes.
And you have to take that same walk past the warehouse to get to your home every day after the bus drops you off, is that right? And do you have any concerns when you're walking home, going past that facility?
Just all the people and more traffic coming down. And with the generator things running, you can't really hear the cars coming behind you. So it's just we can't get over in time, and we don't know who's coming behind us.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And your sister mentioned that you have an older sister and that you wouldn't be walking with her next year. Why is that?
Because I'm going to high school and Sarah is still in middle school.
Gotcha. So she would be walking home by herself. Would you end up walking home by yourself?
Eventually, yeah.
And your mom mentioned you guys play sports. What sport do you play?
Field hockey.
Field hockey. So do you practice that outside?
Yep.
Do you ever feel uncomfortable when you're practicing outside because of the people who work across the street that you can see?
Yes, last night, me and Sarah were outside just practicing a little, and a car came and turned around in our driveway. We didn't know who it was. So.
And that concerned you? That made you feel unsafe?
Yeah, and there was multiple other people who came all the way down the driveway, because that's where the GPS takes them when they want to go to the facility. The GPS takes them down our driveway.
And is it true or accurate that they drive down your driveway and past your house and then have to turn around?
Yep.
Okay, and these are people you don't know?
Yeah.
And do you have any other concerns about the expansion of this use at this property?
Just more people, more traffic, more problems.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to share? They might have questions for you, so just hold on.
Any questions from the board members?
No, sir.
Mr. Hershey?
Same objections, but no questions.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much, Anna. All right, I'm going to switch back if that's all right.
Okay.
So that's the end of the citizen testimony. I was planning to just summarize very briefly what we went over today, and then of course answer any questions you might have in addition. So the point of our presentation today is to give you an introduction of the evidence we're going to rely on when we present our arguments about why this counts as a nonconforming use, why this counts as an expansion of a nonconforming use that either should not be permitted at all or at the very least would require approval by you, the Board of Appeals. We provided the citizen testimony to really give you an understanding of how the current operations under presumably the more limited level of operations impacts this community, so you can better understand how a proposal to expand this use is going to impact this community even further. Yeah, and I think the citizen testimony speaks for itself. The technical evidence about the plans, we'll go into more detail. We'll answer that question you had about the approval of the, I think you said 1,100, 1,200 gallons per day, and we'll dive more deeply into that in the argument section. But we really just wanted to drive home the point that this is not a petty dispute. This is not a campaign against cannabis in the county. These citizens are reasonable. They just really care about their community and their neighbors and their children who have to deal with this potentially for the rest of their lives. So thank you so much for taking a very long time to hear all of their testimony. They really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have at this time.
Any questions?
Yeah, just more of a comment. We've heard from several watermen about the contamination and closing the waterway. But I'm surprised that no one told what the reason was. I mean, you can have contamination from many sources, somebody just assuming that it's from the plant. But I'm surprised that when you close the waterway for contamination, they don't say what the contamination was.
If I can, I would love to agree with you on that. In preparation for this hearing, I wanted to print out a notice to maybe give you an idea of what type of pollutants Canoe Neck Creek was dealing with. But unfortunately, exactly like you mentioned, that is an issue. They only say that it's closed and they don't say what's causing the pollution. And as my clients have mentioned, there's no water testing that's been conducted by MDE that anyone's aware of. So I think my citizens really echo your concern of not having a clear understanding of what's causing the pollution of Canoe Neck Creek, and that's exacerbating their concerns about the potential impacts of this proposed expansion. So I really hear what you're saying on that.
So is there any way you can find out what the contamination was?
I think we'd have to ask MDE, and that would be up to their discretion to tell us, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I can certainly try, though, and maybe be able to present you with an answer at the next hearing.
You
But
can share my concern, though. We're assuming that it's from the plant, but we don't know.
Well, I understand what you're saying, and I apologize. I'm not trying to argue with you, but if I can communicate my understanding of what my clients testified to, their testimony was that a failed septic system can cause human waste to enter the waterways. And human waste is one of the most serious contaminants that can close oyster harvesting and other seafood harvesting that goes on in Canoe Neck Creek and other areas. So I think they're really concerned that if there's already an issue with contamination, even if we don't know what it is, adding another source, a potential source in an area that deals with, that experiences flooding, that's a concern for them, that there might be an additional risk added to the livelihoods that they rely on to go forward. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time. Would you like me to stay up here while he goes?
Doesn't matter to me.
I'll just stay.
I think it's your call.
Okay, I'll stay.
Okay,
Thank you.
Mr. Hershey, your floor.
Thank you
All
so
right,
much.
thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I will make this argument as brief and efficient as I can, but I would like to address a few topics. And I would like to start with the objection that I have been making throughout the night, which is, and I will just read from the protestant's own attorney's letter, which states, quote, "Our argument in this case is limited to our assertion that the amended site plan authorizes the illegal expansion of a nonconforming use." So we've heard a lot about oyster leases or water bodies or aspects of the community or concerns of the community. And those issues, however legitimate they may be or not be, are simply not part of the analysis and are not part of the issue that's in front of the board tonight. Now, some of property owner standing involves potential special aggrievement. I'll acknowledge that, but it's relevant only in the standing context, and I'll get to that in a second. But it's not relevant to the underlying issue on appeal, and I think it's important to make that distinction. Now, I'd like to subdivide my argument basically into two parts. And in the first part, I'd like to address the substance of the argument raised by protestants, which in our view boils down to a simple and erroneous misconstruction of the laws of vested rights. And in the second part, I'd briefly like to address certain of the procedural and jurisdictional issues we think are presented by this case. Now, some of those we've addressed before, some of those we have not.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize, I don't like to interrupt, but can I just have a clarification on what we're covering at today's hearing? My understanding was that we would give an opening statement and then present our evidence, and that argument would be left to the next hearing. And then it was my understanding that Mr. Hershey would be given the opportunity to present an opening statement, and then again, his argument and presentation would be reserved for the next hearing. I just want to clarify if that's the correct understanding, or if I'm misunderstanding that.
Counsel, yes, that is correct. I think that maybe one of the things that may be involved in your question is that naturally in an opening statement, there's some element of argument and persuasion associated with that. So I think the board is inclined, not to speak for the chairman, to give some leeway there.
I would agree. His opening statement, whether it's this week or in October, I think is going to be the same thing.
Okay, understood. I just, based on his delineating different points he wanted to make, I just wanted to clarify, but I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And just for purposes of further clarity, my understanding is that that is plaintiff's case, that they have closed their evidentiary portion of the case.
I'm sorry. Into the microphone more.
Just for purposes of clarity, my understanding is that that is plaintiff's case, that they have presented and closed the full extent of their evidentiary presentation in this case.
That's correct. That the procedure we outlined with counsel prior to beginning this proceeding was that that was the appellant's case on the merits. Yes.
I just want to clarify, sorry again. The one exception maybe being the TARP pictures that the board asked for, and then maybe a question about what was causing pollution, hopefully if you got an answer from MDE. Do we have leave to supplement?
Sure, and of course, the board always has the right to ask for additional evidence and ask questions and ask for follow-up. Yes, correct.
Thank you so much. I apologize again for
Yes.
interrupting.
Thank you.
Before I get into more of the substance of the argument, I want to reference one preliminary thing. I submit that the board already has enough information before it to know that protestants simply cannot prevail in their non-conforming use argument. Protestants' case, which the board has now heard, is based on factual assumptions which simply aren't true and legal arguments that are contrary to the applicable law. And now it's more clear than it was back at the motion to dismiss hearing that protestants' arguments are premised on the health department's approval of the capacity of the septic system and potentially even other state law approvals in other areas that are within the sole purview of the state. We heard both counsel and the witnesses talk specifically about the capacity of the septic system, and that capacity is approved by the health department, not by LUGM. Given these things, in addition to my opening, I'm going to ask the board, as is traditional in cases like this, to enter judgment in favor of Blue Grizz, based on the plaintiff's failure to present their case. Now, such a motion is a typical motion. The appellants here have the burden of proof to present a case, to establish a case, and I submit to the board that they haven't. Now, we have a second night of hearings on October 26th, which is when our witnesses are scheduled to present, and we certainly reserve the right to call all of those witnesses. I just submit that regardless of what those witnesses say, it will remain that appellants haven't made their case and that their claims are still precluded by law, and I'll explain those in a minute. I'd like to start with vested rights. As I mentioned, in our view, boiled down, this case is a simple exercise in the law of vested rights. Protestants' nonconforming use arguments rely on the county's cannabis ordinance, which was adopted in August, but it was effective on September 6, 2022, just for purposes of clarity. But by September 6, the grow house was already constructed. The structure was up, the walls were up, the roof was up. It was already to its current size, and therefore it was vested. In fact, it was up for, say, 4 or 5 months before September 6. It was up sometime in the March to April 2022 timeframe, maybe even a little bit sooner than that. Construction had started back in December, and we even heard some of the protestants' witnesses talk about how construction started when the foundation was poured. And it was undertaken pursuant to a building permit issued in October of 2021 that wasn't appealed. All of this means is that by September 6th, the grow house was already vested. It was already legally protected under the CZO Section 27.2, which protects vested rights, as well as Maryland's common law, which also protects vested rights. And it also means that by September 6th, the grow house was already constitutionally protected under the takings clauses of both the U.S. and the Maryland constitutions. As the board knows, governments cannot take away or deny vested rights without effectuating an unconstitutional taking of property. The grow house is also protected at this point by other doctrines, such as zoning estoppel, which prohibit the county from denying use of already built structures. Put in more practical terms, Blue Grizz has to date invested more than $30 million in the grow house, and both the law and the Constitution protect that investment. Most of the complaints that we heard tonight, or the concerns that we heard tonight, relate specifically to the grow house. The grow house that's already there. They're complaints that are based on things that are already there, and the things that are already there are vested. That's not in front of the board. We're not here to revisit and relitigate the grow house. That's done and it's over. Now, I'd like to focus for a moment on the use aspect of vested rights, because I think it's of particular importance in this case. Pursuant to the laws of vested rights, and this is a quote from a case, Prince George's County v. Equitable Trust, and for those of you who like legal sites, it's 44 Maryland App 272. The court explained, where a property owner obtains a lawful building permit, commences to build in good faith, and completes substantial construction on the property, his right to complete and use that structure cannot be affected by any subsequent change of the applicable building or zoning regulations. In other words, vested rights include the right not only to complete the structure, but also, once completed, to use it. So not only do vested rights include use of the structure, but the laws of vested rights provide that the use of the structure, quote, cannot be affected by any subsequent change of the applicable building or zoning regulations. Protestants are arguing exactly opposite of that principle. Boiled down, they're trying to argue that the county September 6 cannabis ordinance negatively impacts and in fact somehow prevents the full use of the grow house. That's simply not how vested rights work. Subsequent changes to zoning laws do not, and lawfully and constitutionally cannot, interrupt, impede, or restrict full use of the existing invested building. Here, that means that the county September 6 change to the cannabis ordinance cannot and did not impact or restrict full use of the grow house. Protestants' legal arguments are simply wrong in their formulations. Protestants' argument at its core is also premised on an erroneous notion that the grow house was originally designed and approved to be occupied by only 25 people. And that's simply not true. And it's that 25 employee number that Protestants use as this kind of baseline, this starting point, to then argue that 76 employees is an increase. And as we heard tonight, Protestants get that 25 employee number from the Health Department site plan approval for the first sand mound on the Blue Grizz property, the existing sand mound. The sand mound that's just a little bit smaller than the second sand mound that we're talking about tonight, which the first sand mound has existed for several years and has functioned properly. And they get that from the document, which is their own document, that is from the site plan that was submitted and approved by the Health Department and has the giant Health Department signature block and signature right next to it, because that is a Health Department approval. The capacity of that first sand mound does not correspond to the approved or expected capacity or occupancy of the grow house by employees. Put another way, the number of employees that the first sand mound serves is not connected to the overall number of employees of the grow house. And it's not a total septic allocation for the Blue Grizz property, which is what Protestants are effectively arguing. They're trying to argue that that first sand mound was somehow a total septic occupancy for the entire property. And that's just simply not the case. That sand mound predates the grow house. It was established to serve the smaller grow building on the property, which has pre-existed. Mr. Hauser talked about it. It's also been referred to as the barn by some of the witnesses. And that building also has employees, and that sand mound was created specifically for that building and those employees. In addition, I submit that the documentary record for the grow house makes it clear, if it's 52,000 plus square feet didn't already, that it was constructed by occupation by more than 25 employees. Now, we submitted 2 different legal memoranda to the board, and I understand that those are long. And part of why we submitted those legal memoranda is because we wanted the board to know that to whatever level of detail and nuance you wanted to drill, that Blue Grizz's arguments checked out. And so those arguments the memorandum starts simple with the vested rights, and they get more complex as it goes. Attached to that memorandum and referenced throughout it are the architectural plans and drawings for the grow house, which were approved by Lugum back in October 2021. When you submit a building permit, you have to submit construction documents for buildings that include architectural documents. And those architectural documents actually show and depict and establish the expected occupancy of the building that's being approved. Now, the architectural plans are Exhibit D to our legal memoranda. And those architectural plans show both a designed occupancy and an actual intended occupancy for the grow house. It provides two different numbers. And architectural drawings are actually required to have those numbers in it by the International Building Code, Chapter 10. And for the board's reference, there is a public comment in the record from the architects of the grow house that cite to the International Building Code and explain what those different notations mean. Now, if the board is interested, I brought extra copies that are slightly bigger of the architectural plans because they're really small. So if you'd like a copy, just let me know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, this is what I just handed out is a selection of the architectural plans. They're actually hundreds of pages long. And so this is a few of what we view to be the most pertinent parts of those. I can provide the board all 140 to 60 pages if the board would like, but I submit that these are the pertinent pieces of it.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a
Nope. I think you are finished your presentation, and I think anything comes from that will be taken care of in your rebuttal to his presentation. And that's going to begin next week, in October.
I just wanted to ask a question about the authenticity of the documents. I'm not trying to argue anything. I was just curious if Mr. Hershey knew when these were submitted to Lugum.
So they were approved by Lugum. There is a red stamp in the bottom right-hand corner of the first page dated October 27, 2021. And you can see that they got incorporated into the building permit for the grow house, which is 18-1405. So as is common with building permits, there are a series of construction documents that are reviewed and approved that eventually get incorporated into the building permit itself. And that's what this is part of.
Thank you.
So if the board turns to the second page in this packet, it's G002. And if you go to the third column, and I've highlighted it, so the highlights in here are from myself as well, just for clarity. There's a little bubble about halfway down, and below that, you can see it's stated 274 calculated occupants. Then next to it, that's 149 concurrent occupants and 125 actual occupants.
Where was that? That second part?
It is in the third column about halfway down. It's underneath a little bubble that has the number 7 and then table 004.5.
Okay. Thank you.
You see it?
And so that 274 calculated occupants, that's the design occupancy of the grow house. And what that means is it corresponds, the grow house design, the size of the grow house, the hallways, the size of the rooms, they're built so that 274 people can use and occupy the building safely. Current occupants just means that there are rooms that can exceed that 149 concurrent occupancy at one time. That 125 actual occupants is the number that I would like the board to focus on, because that is the number of intended employees, intended occupants in the grow house. In other words, back in October of 2021, as part of the original building permit that wasn't approved, Lugum approved the grow house to have 125 actual employees. So when protestants argue that the grow house was designed, approved, and built only for 25 employees, they're simply wrong. It was actually built for 125 employees. It was approved for 125 employees.
Tell us that.
Don't do that, please. Sorry. Can I just make an instruction to my clients? Just so that it goes more smoothly.
You have help back there, too.
Citizens, if you could please keep your comments to yourself. Mr. Hershey gave us the opportunity to speak, so let's give him the same respect. So I understand you're frustrated, but let's keep those comments to ourselves. Thank you.
I don't want to linger too long on this issue, but I think it's important to note a few additional details about the grow house design, because those details also confirm that it was approved, built, and vested for occupancy by more than 25 people. If you look at the green boxes on the plans that were just distributed, those are the flowering rooms. Each of those flowering rooms has an occupancy of 11 people. Trim room, which is the room on the right with the little seats in it, that has 48 separate seats and stations. The number of toilets in the grow house corresponds to the number for more than 125 employees as required by the International Building Code. The locker room can handle 32 people at one time. And the grow house is roughly 110 parking spaces, more or less. And those parking spaces were also approved by separate site plan dated October 2021. Now, there's more examples, but these are just a few of the examples that show that the original approvals for the grow house dating back to October, November of 2021 were approved for occupancy by more than 25 people, and that the grow house was constructed in accordance with those prior approvals. Currently, Bluegrass has septic capacity for 76 employees. Now, that's site-wide. Some of those employees work in the smaller grow building, so not all 76 even work at the grow house at the moment, but regardless, 76 is less than 125. So I submit to the board that, in fact, there is no increase in the number of employees beyond what the grow house was designed, constructed, and invested for. The grow house is still well within its vested right to be used. And I submit that the board need go no deeper, no further in its analysis than that point right there. The fact that the utilities on the property were installed in stages, and that process was still ongoing at the time the county developed its cannabis ordinance, really has no particular relevance to the vested rights analysis. Bluegrass had started the process for the second sand mound back in October 2022, probably before that, but at least by October 2022. And it took many, many months to get the approvals from the health department. But regardless, the laws of vested rights do not require the building to be completed. Part of the laws of vested rights is a right to complete the building. The building doesn't have to be fully occupied, and all of its utilities don't have to be installed in order for the use to vest. Construction takes time, and septic construction takes an especially long time due to perk testing and other design requirements imposed by the state, which are fairly onerous. So instead, to obtain vested rights for purposes of being protected from a subsequent change in the county's zoning ordinances, only a substantial beginning to construction is necessary. And what we heard from most of the protestants is that they recognized that there was a substantial construction. They recognized the construction early on, early in 2022. That's a long time ago. So I don't think there's any dispute that the grow house is vested. The grow house is there. This case is not about the grow house. It's not about the grow house's impacts, and we're not here to relitigate the grow house. Now, I just want to point out, because I think it's helpful, that these same concepts are also recognized in the CZO. Section 52.2 is the CZO's nonconforming use provision, and subsection 1 of that is a grandfathering provision that provides, quote, a use lawfully occupying a structure or a site on the effective date of this ordinance, or any amendments thereto shall be deemed to be a nonconforming use and may be continued. Now, the term occupied is then defined in Article 9, which is the CZO's definition section. And while perhaps a little counterintuitive or not entirely obvious, the term occupied as used in the CZO means a little bit more than actual physical occupancy of the building. Occupied as used in the CZO also includes such things as being arranged, designed, built, altered, converted, rented, or leased, or intended to be occupied. And I submit that that definition corresponds to the law of vested rights. And it shows that the design and intent to occupy are both important concepts in the county's vested rights analysis. So I submit that the grow house's architectural approvals show irrefutably that the grow house was both designed and intended to be used by at least 76 employees. and that there is no expansion, even as protestants are using the term expansion, which, as I'll explain in a minute, we submit as an incorrect use of that term. There's no increase in employees. We're still well within the 125 that the building was originally approved for actual occupancy. Now, I'd like to talk about a term called intensification. So if we assume for purposes of analysis that the grow house was exceeding the number of employees it was approved for, let's say exceeding the 125, that increase is still not an expansion of the use. The use remains the same. The use category here is crop and horticulture, and specifically growing cannabis. An expansion of a use is a change in the nature or type of use at the property. That's what an expansion of the use is. It's not the number of employees, it's not the business details, it's a change in what is in the use category itself. An expansion is not a mere increase in the frequency or intensity of the same use. Doing something more frequently or more intensely is called an intensification, and that is a term of art in the zoning context. And intensifications do not require separate zoning approvals, and they do not require non-conforming use approvals. Now, in the legal memo we submitted, part of why it was so long is we went through a lot of cases concerning expansions and intensifications. And the reason we did that is because we wanted to give the board examples of what an expansion looked like versus what an intensification looked like. And I would just like to reference one or two of those cases here just to draw that same illustration. The seminal case is Tripp Associates. That case involved a strip club, which isn't a use that's particularly desirable. But that strip club was operating 2 nights a week, and then it moved to operating 5 nights a week. So let's think about that for a second. It's operating 3 additional nights a week. That means more employees, more traffic, more hours of operation, more customers, and more host of all sorts of different operational activities generally. And despite all of those increases and their attendant effects, the court had no trouble concluding that the proposal was merely an intensification. And that was because the club had neither increased in size nor had it changed the type and nature of what it was doing. It was doing the same thing. It was just doing it more frequently and more intensely. And the court even observed in that case that with intensifications, the frequency, quote, the frequency of the use of the subject property in the nonconforming manner was increased, and often significantly so. But none of that changed the court's fundamental conclusion that the increase was an intensification and not an expansion of a nonconforming use. One more example is helpful. In the motion to dismiss hearing, we mentioned the Janigan case. That's the rowboat case. In that case, there was a marina that rented rowboats, and the owner of the marina bought a bunch of additional rowboats to rent. That meant more rowboats, obviously, but it also meant more customers and more traffic and more employees and a more host of different things that went along with renting out more rowboats. Yet the court concluded in that case that the additional rowboats was an intensification. The use was the same, renting rowboats. The marina owner already had a vested right in that use of renting rowboats, and the marina owner could increase the number of rowboats under the canopy of those vested rights. Now, in comparison, in our memo, we also listed several examples of expansions. And expansions, as that term is used in the zoning context. And to be clear, expansions in the zoning context are not quite the same as how some people may use the term expansion in common parlance. In the zoning context, expansions all include either enlarging the building or changing the nature of the use. For example, adding a new building on a site, that's an expansion. Adding square footage to an existing building, adding a second story onto a one-story cafe. These are all cases that we describe in more detail in our memo. Converting a scientific research headquarters into a credit union. That was an expansion because it changed the nature of the use. It changed it from a scientific research use into a credit union. Here, of course, the grow house is the same size as it was originally approved back in October and November of 2021. It was built according to those plans, and the use is the same. It's going to grow cannabis. The use is the same thing that it was approved and constructed for. So the grow house cannot by any means be deemed an expansion. It simply is not. It is not an expansion as that term is understood in zoning law, and it's not an expansion as that term is understood in St. Mary's County. It is at most an intensification, and intensifications do not require nonconforming use approvals. When Lugum did its analysis in this case, Lugum got it correct. That was the correct decision. Now finally, I'd like to turn back to the procedural and jurisdictional issues. and I will be brief. First, I'd like to turn to the Maryland cannabis reform legislation. Now, we referenced this at the motion to dismiss hearing, but it was enacted on May 3rd, 2023, so that was after the briefing. Now, that law is now codified in the Maryland Code Alcoholic Beverages and Cannabis article. And of particular importance is Section 36-406, subsection C, which provides an exemption from any county, quote, use of requirements for facilities such as the grow house. I would just like to read subsection C. And I apologize, I need to take a drink. Here's subsection C. The use of a facility by a cannabis licensee is not required to be submitted to or approved by a county or municipal zoning board, authority, or unit if the facility, one, was properly zoned and operating on or before January 1, 2023, or two, is used by a grower, processor, or dispensary that, one, held a stage 1 pre-approval for a license before October 1, 2022, and two, was not operational before October 1, 2022. Subsection C2 here is clearly satisfied because there is a stage 1 pre-approval for the grow house that's already in the record. It's actually in the record several times, and it dates back to 2018, so it's obviously before October 1, 2022. And second, the grow house was not operational before October 1, 2022. So it meets those requirements. Further, even if subsection C, subsection C2 did not apply, subsection C1 still would. It depends on how you define the term facility, but if you define the term facility to mean the whole property instead of just a grow house specifically, the whole property was already being used for purposes of cannabis growth. There is a smaller grow building on the property that Mr. Hauser referenced that existed prior to January 1, 2023, which is the cutoff in the date. So alternatively, even if you define facility as the whole site, the subsection is still satisfied. In other words, regardless of which direction the board chooses to go, regardless of which one of those interpretations the board chooses, that state law exemption still applies, and it still exempts the grow house from having to obtain use approvals from the county. Protestant's argument at its core presupposes that another use approval, a non-conforming use approval, should have been obtained for the grow house from the county. But regardless of whether such a requirement exists generally, subsection C of the cannabis reform legislation would specifically exempt this grow house from having to obtain any such approval. The grow house does not need to obtain a use approval for use of the facility. It's not required to submit for it. It's not required, the county's not required to approve it. It's just not required because of that state law exemption. Now, second, I'd like to turn to the septic jurisdictional issue. Now, we spent a whole night arguing that, and I'm not going to re-argue all of those points, but I do reincorporate those into this motion. And I'll try to be brief. But at bottom line, that Sugarloaf case that we spent a lot of time arguing about last time, I submit to the board that that case is on point. That case, like this one, purported to involve a challenge to a county site plan approval. But in substance and actuality, it was simply a disguised challenge to the septic capacity of an adjacent building. And looking at the substance of the challenge instead of simply how it was titled, the board in that case dismissed the case for lack of jurisdiction. The appeals court upheld the board's dismissal, and it put together a very helpful analysis explaining that septic approvals are state law approvals issued by the health department, which is a state agency and not a county agency. And because they are state law approvals, because septic approvals are state law approvals, county boards do not have jurisdiction to reverse, supersede, override, or change the health department's approvals. Now, I understand jurisdictional issues, they can be nuanced, they can be complicated. Every time I make a jurisdictional argument, the board doesn't like to be told that they don't have jurisdiction, but I submit in this particular case, it is appropriate to conclude that you don't have jurisdiction. Those septic approvals are appealable. They are appealable to MDE and OAH, and protestants have already filed those cases. They're just not appealable here. MDE, OAH, and the health department are involved in those cases. They do the environmental approvals, they do all of the septic, they do the flow rates, they do the perk test, they do the septic design. All of those aspects, all of those things that we've had questions here tonight are approved, reviewed, approved by the health department acting as MDE's authorized representative for these types of septic systems. And if they're challengeable, they are challengeable through the agency, through MDE and the OAH process. We've been through all that before, but I submit that the one difference between now and the other night is that it's even clearer that this is a challenge to septic capacity. We heard those very terms tonight by the protestants, and their own exhibits show that what they're challenging is the part of the utility plan. And if the board would zoom this out, we would have the word utility plan on it because it's the utility plan. And this box here, which says St. Mary's County Office of Environmental Health, and then the director who signed it, it has that box because that's an approval by the health department. That's not a LUGM approval. LUGM doesn't approve septic capacity. LUGM doesn't have a process to approve septic capacity or an application. LUGM doesn't have a way to approve septic capacity if it wanted to, and it doesn't. All it does is it checks the box to make sure that the health department approval has been obtained. And I'll just note in passing that this particular health department approval was September 13th, 2022, and protestant's appeal wasn't filed until November 9th. So even if they're trying to appeal these things, that appeal wasn't filed within 30 days, so this still isn't a timely filed appeal. I'd also just like to point out, and I will be brief and I'm almost done, that the CZO doesn't even require site plans to depict septic. It's optional. And when LUGM requests that septic gets depicted, it's solely for location purposes only. That depiction doesn't have a capacity. It doesn't have the design requirements in it. The design requirements, the capacity, all the technical specifications, the different equipment that's going to be used, the location, all of those things are approved by the health department and within the sole and exclusive purview of the health department. I submit that there's simply no appealable issue from LUGM related to the septic capacity. I'd like to just briefly touch on standing, but I'm going to largely submit on standing on the memo, which is why we did it. Each party in this case, each protestant in this case, has to be aggrieved to properly participate as a party. We have about 15 protestants, give or take, who are listed as parties in this case, and the board hasn't heard from most of them. And most of them live a long distance away from the facility. Some of them are 8 or 9 miles away in different towns and different zip codes. And those individuals very clearly don't have standing, and they shouldn't participate in this case as a party. They should just be dismissed. And the protestants' exhibit, which is appellants within 1,000 feet of subject property, I mean, they seem to agree that there's only 5 potential parties here that are even remotely within the possibility of a standing analysis. So being within 1,000 feet, that's a prerequisite. That's not the end of the analysis. But we can knock off most of the protestants just because they're not depicted on this exhibit and they're not close enough. In addition to the 1,000 feet, you have to be specially aggrieved. You have to prove that your use of the property, of your property, is somehow interfered in a way that's different than the general use of the public. So Mr. Torres, who we haven't heard from tonight, he can't satisfy that burden because he hasn't testified. There's no evidence about his use of the property. There's no evidence of special agreement. And I submit that one of the reasons we sent our exhibits is if you actually look at the location of some of the protestants compared to either the grow house or the sand mound, they're a far distance away from both of those. Now, the Blue Grizz property is large and it's weirdly shaped. And so if you draw lines to some of those weirdly shaped angles, property line to property line, maybe you can get it in 1,000 feet, but you don't get anywhere close to 1,000 feet if you trace it, say, to the grow house or to where the new septic is. And we think that's relevant to the analysis. If not for this general 1,000-foot threshold, it's certainly relevant to the special aggrievement standard. And just for the board's reference, there's actually a case called Dutch Ship Island that says that protestants to participate as parties each have to be aggrieved. That is, aggrievement is a requirement of the CZO, and in order for them to participate, they each have to meet that requirement. So that isn't just an argument. There is a case right on point that says that's an important part of participation by parties at any evidentiary trial level, which would include this board. I will also just submit to the board that standing is based on property ownership and use of property. So things like oyster leases, now those oyster leases, they're a mile or more down the bay, so they're too far anyway. But those types of things, those aren't property. Those don't fall within the property owner standing concept, and they just, the community can express its concerns, but that doesn't give them standing to file appeals and to challenge things like what we're doing here. Now, I want to just list the reasons why I think that at this stage of the case, it's appropriate for the board to grant judgment in favor of Bluegrass, and I hope that the board considers this. Just one, use of the grow house is already a vested right, and there was nothing in protestant's case in chief that refutes that the grow house has a full vested right to its indoor space in a way that corresponds to its prior October and November 2021 architectural and building permit approvals. Number two is the cannabis reform legislation. Even if there was another use requirement, even if there was a non-conforming use requirement generally applicable, the grow house still meets that state law exemption and still would not need to obtain that approval because it is exempt. The third is our septic capacity jurisdictional argument. And the fourth is that most or all of the protestants lack standing. They're not specially aggrieved. Most of them are just too far away to even meet thresholds and should not be able to participate and should simply be dismissed from this case. And with that, I'll submit the rest of my argument on the briefs that we submitted. And I thank the board for your time and attention.
So we've been asked to make a dismissal of the case tonight.
I could be heard on that, Mr. Chairman, just because if we are going to contemplate a dispositive motion, the county has been able to enjoy a passive role tonight, but I would like to be heard on that before the board considers anything.
Does the board want to consider that? I guess is where I was getting to my question, or they want to go through with the process as we have outlined and have a meeting on October 26th to finish the presentation?
Mr. Chair, if I could just interject, and it is really up to the board to determine how to proceed, but we did, I'll provide my opinion. We did kind of provide a roadmap for the parties and for council on how we were going to proceed. And I think if we're going to consider a motion, it would be fair to allow the appellants to prepare and respond on a more in a more dispositive way to that. And I'm not sure that our roadmap on how we were proceeding tonight allowed for the opportunity to prepare for such an argument. So that's sort of my opinion on it. I think that maybe it may be more appropriate to hold that consideration in abeyance until we come back in October.
Okay.
I could add a little to the thrust of Mr. Scott's comments as well. I will say that obviously we are down Mr. Cherry from the property owners. We are down for health reasons Mr. Nelson from the appellant side. There was a phone call that I was party to when kind of acting as an intermediary between the two. That was explicitly the roadmap we agreed to, and the question was put to me directly, will we have legal argument tomorrow night? And my understanding, it's what I told the appellants on both sides, that we would not be. And I'm sure Mr. Nelson would appreciate the opportunity to have a chance to respond.
Okay, so then what we will be doing is we will have the second night of the hearing. It'll be on October 26, 2023, in this room at 6:30, in which we will then have a county staff report, which will be a refreshment, again, of what we did tonight. I guess is your presentation for the third time. We will then have the respondent's case, to go through the full case, call witnesses as you so need, and then we'll have the appellant rebuttal of this rebuttal statement, Chris citizens' testimonies and statements, if there's anybody left that would like to speak their piece, and then we would close the public hearing, and the board will deliberate if they so desire.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if the board wants to consider a dispositive motion made here this evening, you could certainly, in your discretion, take additional argument and consider that at the beginning of the proceeding in October. But again, it's really up to you.
You lost me on that one.
Do we want to listen to the request for dismiss at the next meeting? Basically is what he's saying.
To listen to what?
Do we want to entertain the request to dismiss at the next meeting?
It's up to you all. You want to do that first? Be the first item we would address?
If you're going to entertain the motion, then it would make sense to fit that in at the beginning of the next meeting, yes.
Okay, and then we can do that also then.
But with that comes arguments from both sides. So either way, we're going to be there the majority of the night. So it doesn't matter which way we go, we're still going to be here on the 22nd, listening to arguments on either case.
Well, do you all feel like you need that again? Or just go into the final presentation on the merits and then make a decision afterwards? Because then both of them get a chance to speak.
When you say next meeting, you don't mean Thursday?
No, October,
26th.
right, excuse me, October 22nd, yes.
I kind of think we could just go to the arguments.
Okay,
I mean,
yes?
that's what I'd say.
Do we need,
I see enough nods.
We've heard.
do we need to vote on that? Do we need to vote on that?
It would be appropriate to dispose of the motion to dismiss, yeah.
Okay,
So I'll make a motion in favor, or
to dismiss.
to just,
His
to
request.
not entertain the dismissal. Does that make sense?
That does make sense, yeah.
Okay. Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. Are we adjourned? You guys want to sit here all night, or somebody want to adjourn the meeting?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it.
Thank you so much for your time tonight.
You're welcome.